Somewhere in the forest, the main character, Albert Falcone, came across a monster in the form of a huge centipede. His main task was to combat pests in the territory of the McBride Kingdom, Falcone's residence. The monster pounced on the boy, but he dodged it by jumping high. The hero was on the front lines, defending the kingdom from the demon invasion. He tore the monster's mouth open and kicked it in the head from above. Despite the fact that everyone was doing the same thing, no one was bored, except Albert himself. While the gentleman went far ahead into the forest, the squad tried to catch up with him, meeting monsters along the way. The boy remembered and knew that he had been reborn as a baby. He had memories from birth about his past life in Japan. The hero noticed that after 40, he had no memories left and decided that this was the age he died. When Albert was little, he learned that he was reborn in an aristocratic family and decided that it was luck. However, not everything was so simple. At the age of 5, the boy was already taught how to fight monsters and survive. At first, the young master could not get used to this and often cried from fear during training. Albert realized that in this world, the aristocrats had another name, sorcerers. They possessed magic that could resist demons. The magic was called mana, which allowed them to manipulate life energy. A weak person would not survive in this world. When the hero was 10 years old, he was already sent to fight monsters. Then he realized that he had come across a rather interesting world. Even though Albert had memories of Japan, he had a strange feeling, as if he had already been in this world. Meanwhile, Baron Brian Falcone, the head of the family, brought home the spoils of a huge beetle head. The people shouted and admired the master, but the man silenced everyone with one hand. The subjects immediately fell silent. He calmly said that he was on an expedition, and then added with a shout that everyone should shout and amuse his master even more. The subjects raised a ruckus in honor of the Baron. Brian Falcone himself rejoiced with him. Albert watched from the roof of the building. He did not share their joy. At the estate, the hero was informed that he had gone to the academy. His father said that the boy would be 15 years old next year, so they received a reminder from the capital about entering the educational institution. The family had already brought up this topic, so Albert thought wearily that they were bringing it up again. She told the Baron that she knew nothing at all about the academy where they wanted to send him. The father was surprised. He thought that his brothers had already told him everything. The hero did not know how to answer the man. He remembered how the Baron threw him off the cliff into a crowd of monsters, and thought that he had not had time to ask his brothers about the academy. Hobbs reminded the Baron that he had decided to leave his son and daughter at Radford Academy for 4 years. Brian muttered that he still had to sort out the curtains for his older children's wedding. This was the first Albert had heard of it. The head of the servants and the father were surprised and asked if the youngest communicated with the family at all. This angered Albert. He admitted that he did not consider himself a future member of the Gas family and added that he was not against staying in the family because he understood that with his character he would not be accepted anywhere. Hobbs laughed and asked what he was talking about. He reminded him that the young master had been fighting demons since he was a child, so everyone saw him as the future heir. Brian smiled and said that they would see, but Albert was not amused. Leaving his father's office, the hero began to think about the Royal Academy of Radford. He was sure that he had heard this name somewhere in the past world. After thinking for a while, Albert remembered that it was an RPG game. Nothing else came to mind. The hero remembered that he had played this game once, so his memories were vague. The boy was sure of one thing. At the end of history, there was a large-scale war with demons. Now he understands that if this happened now, members of aristocratic families would be the first to go to the front lines. If it came to war, the casualties among the Falcone family would be great. He remembered how the soldiers would come back afterwards and report bad and sad news to the relatives of the dead. Albert began to realize that the name in the game and the world he was reborn into were the same. The hero didn't know if he was in the game itself or in a world similar to it, but he was sure of one thing: if he went to the academy, he would be able to find out. On the day of the young master's departure, Hobbs cried. He wished the boy to be careful and asked him to visit the family home when he had settled into the academy. Albert promised. His sister came up to him and said that after his departure, there would be no common sense left in the family. The boy, smiling, wanted to advise the girl not to be so pessimistic, but before he could finish speaking, Melissa swung her weapon. Albert managed to dodge the unexpected attack. The boy was already used to this display of affection from his sister. She muttered that her little brother was not so cute anymore. A woman came up to them and asked Melissa to stop playing with Albert. It was their mother, Clara. She told her youngest son that this might be their last meeting, and they held out their hands. Albert felt a sudden pain when he felt a touch on his face. The woman hit him sharply in the stomach, causing the boy to vomit. Clara looked at her son with disdain and asked if this was their support. Melissa assured her mother that Albert would get better in the capital. Hobbs added that the gentleman lacked training. The hero cursed them all in his mind. He simply hated this place. Colin, the horseman's apprentice, cheerfully told the gentleman in the carriage that his family had simply been embarrassed to see him off, which was why they had reacted that way. The boy said, discontentedly, that there was nothing to laugh about. The hero muttered that his mother had not pitied him when she had beaten him. He understood that if he had not managed to strengthen his body, his insides would have been in trouble. The young man saw his family as muscles without brains. Colin thought that Clara would be lonely in the estate without her caring son. The horseman's apprentice added that he himself would be bored. Albert did not believe the words of the servant, who was also an excellent person in the Falcone family. The young man said that although it was not a bad idea to leave home, he was worried if everything would go well with the capital's aristocrats. Colin noted that his master was a rather cautious man. He reminded Albert that he could fight demons with such powerful magic. The boy said discontentedly that he didn't like fighting them anyway. The hero understood that Colin wouldn't understand him anyway. He told the horseman's apprentice to take him to the capital. The boy cheerfully replied that the young master should rely on him and said that the journey would take 20 days. However, after 5 days on the road, their plans were accelerated. The further they were from the southern territories, the weaker the demons were. The carriage stopped for shorter and shorter periods of time. Albert even thought that he had overtrained. When they stopped to rest once more, the young gentleman froze, listening. Colin noticed this. The hero said that he heard the sounds of weapons. Colin also concentrated and said that they were not monsters. Albert suggested that they might be bandits. The servant immediately declared that they should help if someone was attacked. While Colin was putting out the fire, the hero thought wearily that he had hoped for a quiet trip without incidents. He had a bad feeling. The servant called the master, saying that they had no time to think. In the forest, bandits did indeed attack the carriage. It was defended by soldiers. The commander gave the order not to break formation and protect Mrs. Silms. Albert and Colin were examining the situation from the bushes. The valuable cargo in the carriage was standing right in plain sight, which was stupid for a hero. Colin reminded them that they had no time for guesswork. The young man noticed that the bandits' movements were practiced and suggested that there might be some among them who could stand their ground. The guard side consisted of knights and warriors who were in charge of maintaining order. They might be strong, but they usually dealt with opponents who did not use magic. This difference in strength could be overcome. Albert noticed that the bandits definitely had a plan. The hero suddenly jumped out of the bushes and ran to the battlefield. He shouted to Colin to keep his head down and warned him that there was some kind of trick. The boy ordered the servant to deal with the bandits and then return and prepare the carriage. Colin shouted that he understood and ran straight at one of the enemies. The bandit was shown not to let the boy escape. He swung his weapon, preparing to attack the enemy. However, the next moment, Colin cut his body in half. The bandit comrades were stunned. They froze. Colin looked in their direction and muttered that it was their turn now. The enemies were terrified. They immediately ran in different directions. Albert jumped high up the tree. He was right above the tree. He was right above the carriage. Apologizing for going to sort something out quickly, the hero used magic. Bright balls appeared around him. He aimed them straight at the bandits. When they hit the enemies, the balls burned them and destroyed them. The people didn't even have time to do anything. The projectile was the magic on the island from Albert's past world. Compressed mana was ejected at high speed. It was the hero's original magic. The youth muttered that his strength, compared to the great forest, was nothing. After the battle, the commander was informed of the losses. 2 were killed, the rest were injured, and although there might be some difficulties later, overall the warrior had no serious problems. The commander was sorry that Bill and Mylar were killed. She was told that there were bandits who had managed to escape, and she was asked if they should follow them. The commander said that they could not waste any more time and effort, so they should prepare to leave. At this point, Madame Silms interrupted them. She ordered the wounded to be placed in her carriage. The girl could not allow the warriors who fought for her to remain in the forest. The commander wanted to explain that due to the peculiarity of the carriage, the lady would not be able to rest well then, but Selmas insisted, saying that she could walk. The soldier did not dare to argue with the girl any further. Watching the warriors pile the bodies into the carriage, the commander asked the gentlemen what they thought of the recent magic. The girl said that she had only felt a flow of mana, nothing more. She added that she had examined the bodies and noticed that the magic was powerful. Selmas assumed that this magic was specifically used against monsters, collected by sorcerers from the frontier. The commander asked who it could be. The girl believed that it was definitely not a servant of some noble. The lady admitted that she didn't want to think about it. She had heard their rescuers talking about a trick and assumed that they didn't want to be involved either. Selmas added that if she saw them again, she would thank them on her own behalf. However, she was not sure if aristocrats should be allowed to do whatever they wanted. The girl understood that many people had already died for her, so she could not stop there and was determined to continue pursuing her goals. Meanwhile, Colin and the master continued their journey to the capital. The servant asked if Albert was sure of his decision, since they were still bandits on the battlefield. The hero asked not to put ordinary people on a par with Falcona. After all, not all people would keep their composure when their limbs were suddenly torn off before their eyes. No one wanted to end up dead. Albert said that there was something valuable in the carriage. Besides, he heard that in the central part of the family were fighting with each other. The gentleman suddenly confessed that this was the first time he had killed not a monster, but a man. Colin had also done this for the first time in his life. Albert wondered if the bandits were enemies or not. Colin interrupted his thoughts and said that the bandits were enemies of the people. The young gentleman agreed with this. The hero continued to ponder what this event was. If it was related to the main story, then it was good that Albert intervened and helped. However, he remembered that the main plot was supposed to start at the academy. Now the young man could not stop thinking about it. It was the story of the tragedy of St. Silms. She was on her way to the village for treatment and was to die during an attack by bandits. It was told in a monologue of a small mission. The main story began slowly. Garrow had a dream. His family was there. His mother was calling her youngest son to study with a gentle voice. His sister was greeting Albert. His father said that he was taking a break, the strength to play with his son. However, their family had unusual lessons and games. Clara taught Albert how not to throw a dagger and how to strike an enemy correctly. Melissa loved to make her sweet little brother cry with different weapons. Brian threw the ball so hard that he could hurt the boy. Albert woke up sweating. Sitting up, he realized it was just a dream. At that moment, Colin informed the gentleman that they had arrived in the capital. Their carriage was going down a hill, so they had a beautiful view of the city. The kingdom of McBrain was built 400 years ago. Now, it was the leading nation in everything. When he came to the girl administrator, Albert was told that he would have to wait 6 months before the next admission. This was not in the boy's plans. Coming out of the building, Colin muttered regretfully that they had traveled so many days in vain, and there were no daughters of noble families in the area. Approaching the carriage, the horseman's apprentice told the master that he would leave him here. Albert thanked him for his help. Finally, the servant advised the hero not to forget Falcona's principles in the capital. They included being always ready for battle, not being willful, and acting quickly. Albert nodded. In his mind, he wearily noted that he was being put on guard again. When the hero was left alone on the streets of a big city, he did not know what to do next. The boy could not enter the academy now, and this meant that he had nothing to do. Suddenly, he felt some movement behind him and turned around sharply. Albert could not understand what it was and the unpleasant feeling. It was as if he felt mana on himself. Looking closely, the hero could determine where the magic led and where its source was. Following the dark smoke of mana, Albert came to the church, where the priest stood and asked forgiveness from the goddess. The young man approached the man from behind and asked if he could come in. The man jumped in fright. Turning around, the priest said that the boy could definitely come in. He noted that he was seeing him for the first time and asked why he was there. The capital was divided by huge walls into 4 districts. The first was inhabited by the highest aristocrats, the second by the truly rich, the third by ordinary people. The last area was inhabited by strangers. There was a dangerous atmosphere of former slums, as well as discrimination from the capital's residents. Albert told the priest that he had recently arrived in the capital and decided that he should greet the goddess at the nearest church. However, the hero did not notice something. In front of him stood an inventory character, the lord of an abandoned church. The spirit of a young minister who was engaged in reconstruction lived there. It was a quest to exorcise a spirit, but the adventure had nothing to do with the main story. The boy asked why the church was in such a terrible state. The priest replied that it had been beset by the hatred of the capital's residents. He said that the temple was involved in helping the poor, and as a result, the local church began to attract more attention than others from the 3rd district, which did not please the residents of the capital. Because of this, they decided to build their own churches in the city of strangers. People started leaving the church, and they ended up in a vicious circle. Albert thought that if the priest continued to work alone in the temple, he would just hate everyone and become a monster. He told the man that people were immature compared to the goddess. The hero asked what he was going to do. The young man glanced at the minister and noticed that he looked like a man who had already made up his mind. In fact, Albert saw that a dark mana had formed around the priest. The man said that although his interlocutor was so young, there was something father-like about him. He told how one person offered him a plan and a set of support. Albert asked if, as a servant of the goddess, the minister was going to defile himself for the sake of repairing the church. He smiled and remained silent. The hero did not understand how such a conduct could be normal for a priest. He doubted if it was not a violation of the holy rules. In addition, dark mana was still flowing out of the man, which made the young man nervous. He decided that it would be wrong to ignore what he had heard. Albert decided that he would follow the priest. He had nothing better to do anyway. The boy continued to visit the priest in person and watch him secretly. While the man watered the flowers and tended the garden, Albert thought. Several days had passed since their first conversation, and the minister continued to evade, no matter how much the hero asked him. It would be convenient for the young man to know the date when the main event of the story would happen. During a surveillance, he noticed that the priest's bottom was quite monotonous. Albert hung on a high fence through which he watched the man. Passers-by looked askance at him. The young man felt that there was something wrong with the priest. He knew that even people of high status could be abnormal. The world in the aristocratic district was completely different. He wondered if there were people like that in other districts. At that moment, the church minister, Mr. Franz, was called by a girl. The man approached her and greeted her. Her name was Mary. Albert noticed from the moment of surveillance that this girl came to the church every day to see the priest. At first, he thought that she came to the temple, but then he realized that Mary came first of all to see Franz. Meanwhile, the girl noticed that the minister had lost weight and asked if he was eating well. She reminded him that if he could not eat normally, he would have to leave the city. Franz shook his head. He said that he was not going to leave this place. At the same time, the priest would not be able to see Mary. The girl blushed at these words. There was an atmosphere of lovers around them, which irritated and tired the hero a little. In the tactical moment, he did not understand what he was doing. Albert's neighboring priest continued for several more days. At the next meeting of Mary and Franz, the man apologized to the girl and said that they would not be able to be together today because of his business. It was obvious that Mary was upset by this news. For Albert, it was a good opportunity to learn something new about the minister. The boy assumed that Franz would be busy with the upcoming event. However, the priest was doing his usual household chores with dignity. He washed the church floor, went to the market where he was offered flowers, and went to the civilian area. All this time, Albert was watching him from various hiding places. After work, Franz decided to visit a public bathhouse, which surprised the hero a little because it was an unusual place with the presence of purity magic. The boy knew that everyday magic was magic that was fully available, not even to sorcerers, but to commoners. They used magical fire, water, wind, healing, and pure mana. Usually, people went to the bathhouse before a wedding, another important event, or a date. A drum sounded in Albert's head. He decided that he had found a clue. Afterwards, the boy froze and asked himself if he wanted to continue spying on Franz. After all, he would have to not only hear but perhaps see everything, and he did not want that. The boy realized that he had miscalculated. When the attendant finished washing himself in the public bath, he came out in casual clothes and headed somewhere. Albert decided that he would follow him a little longer. Franz took him to a restaurant. It was a nice place, but too simple for nobles. At the entrance, Albert was greeted by a worker. He looked around and saw a priest sitting at the bar. Mary was sitting there too. They were sitting a little further away, but they were looking only into each other's eyes. There was a bright atmosphere of a loving couple between them. Sitting at the table and hiding behind the menu, Albert was determined that his surveillance had led him to a simple date between Franz and Mary. The hero realized that the priest had gone to the bathhouse to wash himself precisely for the date. He felt deceived, although it was he who had illegally followed the minister. Albert was brought a dish and began to eat it discontentedly. No matter how much the boy looked at Franz, he was simply a man who had an affair. When the hero began to enjoy the food, he noticed how the priest made a strange gesture with his hand, as if the man was giving an order. At that moment, Mary got up from her chair and walked across the room. A waiter with a restaurant visitor was walking towards her. Albert watched her movements carefully. The girl accidentally bumped into the man. He apologized to Mary, after which the priest's beloved left the hall. After that, Albert realized that in front of him was not just a naive girl who liked the deacon. When Mary encountered a restaurant patron, the hero noticed her surreptitiously stick a needle into the man. The boy assumed it was murder by poisoning. Albert also half a mile that Franz was tense before the order was carried out, and then relaxed. The task was completed, and their target was this man. The young man did not know why they were doing this, but he was sure that the relationship of this couple was not simple. Albert began to understand that the people of the capital loved conspiracies, while the Falcone family simply destroyed monsters. Inside, the boy noticed that he was already beginning to miss his home days, but he no longer had any connection to the family. The hero got up from the table and left the restaurant. But Franz noticed him. Walking late in the evening along the streets of the capital, Albert went into a narrow alley where Mary met him. However, he was not surprised. The young man noticed that the girl was serious. Mary did not answer him. She staggered and, without further ado, she pounced on Albert. The girl took out her knife and opened it. She wanted to attack the impudent fellow who dared to follow them, but he dodged. Albert said with a bored look that she was moving slowly. He grabbed her hand and, squeezing it hard, broke the girl's wrist. The young man broke the enemy's leg with a precise kick. Mary screamed from the sharp and strong pain. Albert grabbed her head and slammed it against his belly. The girl lost consciousness. After the boy dealt with her, he began to look around, looking for other attackers. Realizing that Mary had attacked him alone, he asked what the girl had achieved by doing this. Albert picked up Mary and carried her to the church to see Franz. Arriving, he threw the girl's body at the doors of the church, which broke from the impact. The boy waved his hands in apology for such a sudden visit. The priest wanted to be indignant, but then noticed that Mary was lying in front of him. The girl's legs and arms were broken, her face was covered in blood, and she didn't have enough teeth in her mouth. The man immediately pressed Mary to himself, covering her body with his body. Albert came up to him. He said that he didn't care what they were doing. However, the Falcone family member was not going to leave them alone after they decided to make an attempt on his life. The boy had a cold, dead look in his eyes. He promised that this time he would not kill Franz and Mary. The priest began to sweat when he realized that a sorcerer stood before him. However, the man felt that the mana of the young man was different from that of an ordinary sorcerer. His magic seemed to consume Franz. It seemed to have no end. Albert had been suppressing his mana all this time, which even the deacon who possessed the holy technique was unaware of. The boy asked if they had mistaken him for a client or someone who was somehow related to the aristocrat Franz had spoken of. The priest asked who he was. However, Albert was not going to answer him. He told the man to carefully heal Mary's body, because with an inept technique, the treatment would be useless. As he left, the young man said that if they wanted to share information, the couple could find him at the Angus Hotel. Franz watched Albert leave in silence. Several days passed. The hero sat in his room and thought. He wondered what the black clot of mana was that he had seen. Albert wondered if he should even worry about it, since nothing had happened to the body. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. It was Mary. She awkwardly entered the room and introduced herself. Albert noticed that the girl had no visible wounds, and all her teeth were in place. After all, the holy technique was an unusual magic. The boy asked if the girl had come to take revenge on him. Mary admitted that she had been sent by order of the organization. She did not know how Mr. Al felt, but Franz did not want them to meet. The girl said that they were just contractors for an organization that had taken root in the capital. The deacon, who was the cover, was exhausted by the decline of the church. He had his own style, and when he had many requests, the man could still choose, but now he only had problems. The young man thought Franz was crazy in a good way. Ordinary people would not understand this priest. He asked the girl what the meaning of her story was. Mary continued her story. She had received orders to hold a meeting with Deacon Franz. It seemed that the organization had become interested in the young Falcone family member due to recent events, but she was not sure that they would be able to cooperate with them. The boy understood the essence of the event. Negative feelings could come into contact with mana and cause a transformation into an evil spirit. Given the past of the priest, the organization will not act carelessly. If Franz becomes an evil spirit, then the defense forces will come into action, which will then reveal the state of the church. When Albert appeared, the organization thought about eliminating the deacon before he turned into an evil spirit. That's why Mary appeared before the young man that day. The girl knew the hero's name. He was known as a wizard from the borderlands. She understood that she was powerless against him. Albert eventually refused to cooperate. He was not interested. Mary bowed her head in disappointment and said that although the organization would be happy to see him as Falcone, if he refused, she would back off and not insist. Albert remained silent. The spirit's first target would be the man who killed him. Only the hero knew this, and he was not going to tell anyone about it. He had a premonition that the organization would try to contact him again. Albert understood that they intended to use him and then throw him away. The girl bowed and left. A few days later, the bodies of Franz and Mary were found near the statue of the goddess. They left this world too soon, and those who knew them will mourn them. Since the incident with Franz and Mary, rumors began to circulate about the appearance of two spirits in the abandoned church. Without worrying about this, the admissions committee for the academy opened. Albert went through all the formalities and was accepted. The hero stood on the second floor and watched the students. He saw who got what points. In the message days, the young man watched the people from the aristocratic district and the civilian. He noticed that the difference in strength was great. However, if this was the entire power of the nobility, then the demons could become a serious threat to them if they met. At the end of history, humanity must face the demons in a war. Albert wanted to minimize the risk of this event so that there would be no unnecessary casualties. The hero understood that he was in the game world. Although he had no clear evidence, it was true, and if so, then the Academy Hall was the opening event of the game. Attracting a lot of attention during the procedure, the protagonist and his rival start a quarrel, which marks the beginning of the game. Several days had passed since the reception procedure, and nothing had happened. Then Alert decided that the main event should happen on the last day of the reception. Before that, he still had his owl time, and he had nothing to do. He was approaching the entrance to the academy since he was still considered an applicant. Albert was tired of dealing with the hooligans from the civilian area. The hero did nothing but wander around doing nothing. He felt bored. Suddenly, a realization came to him. Even though he hated fighting monsters, it was the capital that he felt bored in. Albert didn't understand if it was because he was from the Falcone family. An old man noticed his suffering. He was sitting on a high stepladder trimming bushes. The man asked if he was not disturbing the young man and if he could help the student in any way. After going down and talking to Albert at the table, the old man realized that he was homesick. The man said that it was, on the contrary, happiness to have a place to return to. The boy himself did not understand why he wanted to return home. Mr. Vince replied that such things were understood at a distance. In his youth, he did not like to return home at all. As soon as a man appeared there, everyone began to complain. Albert looked around. Vince said that this was only part of the academic garden, but a lot of effort had been put into it. The hero sensed a warrior in the old man. He could restrain his wariness well, although it was a dangerous trick. The boy knew that Vince's name was not real. The old man was a demon who had returned and gained power. In fact, he was over 200 years old. He was also an inventory character. Colad Albert parted with the old man. A girl came to Virus. She was unhappy that the gentleman was going to be under the protection of people. The man reminded that according to the agreement with people, this place went to them, and he was not going to leave here. Ida asked if the desired life of a demon was to wag its tail and flatter people. The girl did not agree with this. Vince lost his head. He said that young people like her were not seeing the whole picture, and added that those who had ended their way of life were demons from their homeland who had started the war. It had been many years since Vince became a refugee. He still remembered how they were oppressed by humans and forced to flee. They changed names, countries, and only the nobles of this country agreed to keep their secret. Vince told Ida that some families were also unhappy with the current situation. However, without human protection, the master would not have been born either. If he had to end up being ungrateful, the old demon could put up with it. Ida believed that humans were a weak race that was no match for demons. It was true that the master possessed an extraordinary amount of mana, which was rare even among demons. It seemed that he was capable of using strong magic, but nothing more. Vince asked his companion to look at the prosperity of the capital and asked if she thought the demons could also build such a civilization. Vince looked into Ida's eyes and confidently said that although people are weak alone, they are strong together. The young demon believed that they could take away what people created because they had the power. However, Isla did not understand anything. The old man grabbed his head. If it were that simple, then he would not be a refugee. After finishing the conversation with the master, Ada realized that he was still treating her like a child. She couldn't understand why Vince relied so much on people for support. The image of people like the old demon is very secretive. Ada noticed a student standing in front of her. She asked him what he was doing there. Albert explained that he had brought sweets for Mr. Vince, but he didn't know that the old man had guests. The girl passed the boy and said that she was leaving, and that the master was inside. The demon cast a contemptuous glance at the hero. She saw that his mana was weak. Suddenly, Ida realized that this was the man who had gone to the master. She wondered what business he had with the old man. She looked after Albert and wondered if he was one of the patrons the gentleman had spoken of. Approaching Vince, who was sitting on the street, the hero recalled the master's recent guest. He explained that Ada was the first of the rootless, and added that she did not bother him. The young man said that despite this, the young demon's mana was simply amazing. This interested Vince, and he asked the nice gentleman to share his opinion about Ada. Albert noticed that her mana level was at the level of a frontline noble, and her abilities were high. However, Aida's control skills and the core itself were not very good. The youth felt that she was wasting her talent. Vince said that the young demon considered mana reserves the most important. That was why she was so strong. The old man considered such behavior childish. Vince said that in the capital, there were no daily battles like on the front lines. Albert pointed out that they, on the other hand, lived peacefully. The old man laughed and added that Ada would be furious if she heard that. Vince knew that Albert was hiding his mana at a high cost, but even so, the boy's magic was only a third of Aida's reserves. The old demon told himself that even in front of a teenager, he was willing to try his best. He believed that someone who knew the real battlefield could have been sent by the Protector on a secret mission. Mr. Vince had doubts about how he wandered around the academy, looking at the surroundings, but Albert did not give any signs. The old man was surprised that they were served cakes for tea, but he was interested in something else. Taking the papers, the demon was surprised. Meanwhile, Alert was thinking that it was high time to enter the enrollment procedure. Tomorrow he would already be in the main hall. The young man informed the gentleman that he would not be able to visit him for some time. The old man immediately realized that Alert had already signed the papers. However, as the leader of his countrymen, Vince could not act hastily, so he decided to give the young master of the Falcone family more time. Meanwhile, the young demons gathered in a hut in the forest. They were deciding on Ida's plan, but were unsure if they wanted to proceed without Master Vince's permission. Ida told her comrade that he could leave at any time. She added that they would do so without the master's permission, and that they would follow the thread tied to them. The goal of the young demons was to find at least some information about people that Vince did not know. In this way, they would be able to quarrel the master with his patrons, so the old man would be freed and would stop being dependent on people, and with him the demons. They were sure that if everything went according to plan, the old man would listen to them. Ida's comrade mentioned Albert. He doubted that he was an aristocrat with such a small amount of mana, and suggested that the student could just be a decoy who didn't know anything. The girl thought that if the boy was in the academy, he would already know everything. Ida smiled and said that under torture, Albert would give them everything he knew to save his life. He was just a man who would sell even his pride to save himself. This would be the signal for a counterattack to free their brothers and sisters hiding in the capital. The young demons were ready to destroy the humans and restore their lost honor. When they finish, they will be received at home with all due honor. It will be a triumphant return of heroes to their homeland. Vince's quiet day was interrupted by the news that Ida and the others had set up a trap. The old man asked if the gatekeepers had sold themselves to the military faction, but that was not the case. The demon was informed that Isla had attacked a student who was visiting the master. He jumped up. Things were bad. The demon did not understand the reason for such actions on the part of his comrades. He assumed that something could reveal the true identity of Ill. Vince asked if Albert was dead. The guy replied that Bart and Bella had died. After that, the old demon didn't understand anything at all. Vince was told that the body had no head. It was assumed that it had been killed by a magical attack. From the remains, it was determined that it was a human. The gentleman asked who else had participated in the attack and if there had been any other deaths. Vince was told that Bart, Bella, and Bar were also involved in the attack. They had found 3 fingers that belonged to Bessie and did not know if the others were alive, but they hoped they were safe. The gentleman felt hot under the news. His body began to tremble. He didn't care how prepared the young demons were. They were good warriors in terms of strength, but he didn't expect that 3 of them could be destroyed at once. The old man asked what happened to Ela. No one knew for sure, but they assumed that she was holding Master Al hostage to give the powers to old Vince. Most likely, she was hiding to interrogate the young man. The old man said that they must quickly find Ada and the others. Meanwhile, Ida had already been found. She stood in the protective dome with her face to the bed. The girl was motionless. Her eyes reflected fear and madness. The hut was completely destroyed. The comrades who had arrived began to examine the remains of the house and look for the others. But it was impossible to see anything, since nothing remained of the demons. They began to knock on the girl's dome and ask what had happened, but she did not pay attention. The last events that brought horror flashed before her eyes. While Vince was being alerted to the ambush of the young demons, they were sitting in a hut in the forest. Aida was visibly nervous and asked if they should check. One of the comrades stood up and said that they should check everything. Garan was a big guy. He reminded Aida that she was their leader, so she should keep her head up and her back straight. The girl apologized to her friend for having to ask him to go and fight the enemies. She wished him to defeat everyone, to which the guy smiled. At that moment, Garan exploded. His body split into 2. Blood sprayed onto Ida's face. Another comrade screamed in fear. While the girl was coming to her senses, his head was already cut off. Looking to the side, Ida saw many bright balls that were destroying her team. The girl screamed. Her protective dome disappeared. She grabbed her head and collapsed into a ball on the wooden floor of the ruined hut. Everyone was frightened by the surprise. They decided to leave everything to Mr. Vince. Albert was called to the old man. Sitting in the room, the young man confirmed that he had been attacked yesterday, but his enemies were very weak. He was disappointed because he expected more from the battle. Mr. Vince was sitting on a chair, and on both sides of him stood young men. The old man asked what he could do for Albert. The young man's gaze changed immediately. He became serious at once. The hero asked if Vince understood that he was cleaning up after Ada. Albert said that if the girl survived, it meant that her rotten talent could have paid off. Vince admitted that Ada had acted foolishly. He was ready to kneel down and beg the young master for forgiveness. The young man said that there was no need for that. Albert said that if someone wants to hurt someone, the attacker must respond back, and added that the old man can't just apologize. Vince asked if the hero had killed Ada. The young man replied that it was too late for that. He believed that if the old man was the cause of the girl's death, he should teach her a lesson. Vince was worried that a war could start between demons and humans. Ada had been sedated upon their return, and she hadn't woken up yet. Even if they could break her, her heart would be broken. Brother and Bella's heads had been ripped off. Greta and Garin didn't even have bodies left. All that was left of Beg were his fingers. Vince knew that everything could fall apart if they lost Ada too. Vince said that Il had made a mistake. The old demon wanted him to think about it. That was the master's decision. He could no longer watch their brothers die. Albert got up from the couch and advised them to be careful. The young man expressed a desire to never see Ada again. Vince swore that this would not happen. The young master noted that he would not believe such an oath after the attack. He was going to take revenge, and if he had to, he would not touch Vince. Albert wanted to end it all once and for all. The young man thought the old man was naive. Vince thought he had given the youth freedom, but after so many years of peace and quiet, they had grown too complacent. The old demon began to blame himself for their deaths. He asked his people for forgiveness for being a foolish leader. Spirits that Vince did not see surrounded him. They were all members of his team that Albert destroyed. In the story, the demonic change and the demons living with humans were divided from within due to the rise of a warring faction. Their leader and other old men were unable to keep the youth under control because they could not choose between the human and demonic masses. After the hero's success, the leader's life was taken by his own in an open conflict between the factions. Until the very end, Vince wanted to live in peace with humans. But this incident will be a turning point. Meanwhile, the evil organization investigated what happened in the cabin in the forest. The girl reported that the trace of mana was too weak, but they were able to detect as much magic as in the raids on criminals. They also noticed that the method they tried to hide their tracks was different. Her friend sighed and said that the investigation was becoming intense and complicated. The girl reminded that this was only for reference. The man said that despite their agreements from above, he was sorry that he had disturbed the sorceress. The girl didn't care, because she would have been on a mission anyway. She knew she couldn't just interfere with a criminal organization under the patronage of the nobility. The task was to sort out the loan. The girl began to get nervous. She felt like something was starting to make a lot of noise and destroy the invisible. Radford Academy of Magic opened when the first king said that aristocrats should be educated. This institution had 100 years of history and authority. Albert watched from the second floor at the Academy Hall, where there were many new students. He noticed that most of them looked like inventory characters. The hero had a strange feeling that someone was watching him, but he could not understand who was doing it and for what purpose. Suddenly, he saw a glow in the corridor. There was no mistake. These were the main characters of this world. Albert felt a pressing presence and a white manga that enveloped the entire hall. The guy was surprised that no one felt it. The young man approached the girl and greeted her. Her name was Ariel. She was glad to see her friend Daryl. The young man said that he and Cecilia, his friend, had assumed that they would be able to meet her. The warrior girl came to Ariel for half a year and bowed, greeting her. The lady also greeted her friend. Daryl asked Cecilia if she was not greeting their friend too formally. The girl replied that they were in the royal capital. Ariel noted that she was serious, as always. Albert noticed that the main characters were behaving like childhood friends. He understood that the plot would determine how the characters' relationships would develop. At that moment, Daryl remembered that Ariel was engaged and congratulated her on this event. He admitted that he was surprised when he found out about it. Those around him, hearing what the young man was saying, froze. Cecilia called her friend sternly. Ariel wanted to explain to him, but she didn't have time. A voice was heard in the corridor, ordering Daryl to move away from the lady. It was Adam McBride. He was angry with the hero. The boy threw his glove at Daryl and announced that he was challenging him to a duel. Everyone was surprised. People had only seen such things in plays and historical novels. Ariel tried to calm Prince Adam down. She warned him that the one he was challenging to a duel was the Baron's son. The guy didn't want to back down and said that he had shown disrespect towards the lady. Daryl tried to explain that he had not meant to be disrespectful, but the prince interrupted him, saying that was exactly what the hero had done. Adam was not pleased that the young man had addressed the lady by her first name. The prince added that, as her fiancé, he did not give permission. He released his energy. Albert felt Adam's mana and was simply amazed by its power. Cecilia approached her comrade and advised him to apologize. He immediately bowed and asked for forgiveness. He admitted that he had acted carelessly by calling the Lord by name. The hero decided to explain the reason for his actions. As a child, he was taken care of by the Dunstable family, and because they were so close, he called the girl by her name. Watching this picture, Albert understood that in this country only titled people and their spouses were called aristocrats. A son or daughter was only connected with their status and, strictly speaking, was not an aristocrat. In academia, status didn't matter, but when it came to royalty, things were different. Even after Daryl apologized, Adam wasn't happy. He said he'd accept the boy's apology and call off the duel. The prince warned that the hero would not have a second chance. He carefully took Ariel's hand, and together they left the hall. The girl glanced awkwardly at her friends one last time. Daryl thanked Cecilia for her help. Albert recognized the heroes as the daughter of Viscount Orco and the son of the Baron. The young man realized that he had definitely been reborn into the world of the game he had once played. He saw how powerful the mana was that the main characters had. It literally surrounded everyone and everything. The amount of magic depended on the person's status in the world. Albert noticed 3 people approaching him from behind. They asked if he was a member of the Falcona family. The hero immediately realized that they were the ones watching him all this time. He turned to them and asked what they wanted. The young men seriously demanded to come with them. They wanted to talk to him. The hero was bandaged, led through the academy, and placed in a carriage. When they arrived at the place for the conversation, Albert's bandage was removed. He looked around and did not recognize the room. Yuel approached the young aristocrat and apologized for his rudeness. He introduced himself and introduced the hero to Vera and Lone. Their group was called Royal Shadows. Yuel added that they could not reveal the names of their families. However, Vera and Lone were his servants. Albert remembered that Clara, his mother, had told him about this organization. He said that he knew about their situation and asked what they needed. Yoen argued with answering their questions. He warned that due to his sensitivity to the fluctuations of mana, he could immediately recognize a lie. Albert promised to be honest. Vera stood behind him and watched every move of the young aristocrat. She did not understand why he did not react in such a situation. The girl could not find out what he was thinking. Feeling Eva's intense gaze, Albert felt tired. After some time, the leader of the organization, Victor, came in. He asked directly if a member of the Falcone family was an enemy for Adam or for the entire royal family. The young man replied with a smile that he had never thought about it. The man glanced quickly at the perceptive Eva. She nodded. Victor asked what Albert had been looking for in the Great Hall. The boy admitted that he had been looking at the amount of mana people had. As a villager, he had no contact with other aristocratic families, so he was curious to know how useful other families were. Vera knew that the boy was not lying, but at the same time she did not understand why her pressure on Albert had no effect. At that moment, Victor turned to her, asking her to stop. She nodded. The man told the young aristocrat that they sometimes had difficulty dealing with Falcone. Albert took it as a compliment. Victor told Yoel that their conversation was over and ordered the young man to be taken back. The hero was surprised that everything went quickly and easily. Approaching the door, Lone pulled the blindfold towards him. Albert was about to put it on his eyes, but Victor's words stopped him. The man assumed that a member of the Falcone family would be connected to Daryl and Cecilia. The young man did not expect to hear this, and rarely turned to Victor, thereby giving himself away. He was immediately pinned to the floor by the royal shadows. The man was glad that Albert had finally revealed himself. He approached him and asked what he knew about them. The guy said that he had learned about the heroes from the recent incident. He didn't understand why no one was paying attention to them, although it must be some kind of blessing to everyone. Victor was surprised that Potter could see something in the heroes of their country. After thinking for a while, he ordered Yoel to call the bishop. He immediately went to carry out the order. The man ordered Vera to let Albert go, but the magic continued to hold him back. Victor sat down next to the young man and offered to talk about the oracle's divine child. About 1,000 years ago, a holy sister received a vision from a goddess that 2 heroes of light would arrive from the border. Together with the people, they would bring thousands of years of prosperity to this country, and together with the demons, they would bring hundreds of years of misfortune. Whatever the outcome, the people and the demons would fight. These 2 heroes of light must form a harmony that will last for 1,000 years. The holy sister had to name the heroes. The news quickly reached the aristocratic families, but many took it for a joke. Victor said that the priests immediately decided everything when they learned of the divine protection that came with the appearance of these heroes. Al wondered why the main characters were so important. He asked the leader of the organization if there were many who knew about these heroes. They told him no, because it was considered the most important secret. Few people, even in the royal family, knew about it. Al understood that the people of the organization mistook him for a member of a faction that was against the goddess. The hero knew the secret, so he couldn't leave it like that. He asked Victor if they wanted the heroes to be puppets and dance to the tune of the organization. They answered him that the less you know, the better you sleep. The boy laughed. He said that he could tell everything. The priest was worried that he could not recognize the light of the divine child in Alberta. Victor asked again if the priest was sure of his analysis. He answered that Al was not capable of using divine magic. The priest did not see the light of God in the boy. Victor wanted to see him again, whether Al was really a sorcerer or not, because he had too little mana. The hero wondered if he was the only one who could see the priest's mana. After all, she was black and disgusting. This priest's mana reached out to the boy to touch him. Al wondered what it was, and whether it could be somehow related to reincarnation. The hero turned to Vera with a question. She was not very kind. Al wanted to know about the chains that were wrapped around him. He asked what they responded to, only his mana or someone else's as well. The girl replied that any. She was surprised that the boy could see her chain, because she had made it specially invisible to the eyes. Her chain was supposed to react not only to mana, but also to feelings. With a large reaction, the chain is activated, and at such a distance, it can be destroyed. Vera was also surprised that Albert's mana did not fluctuate at all. She didn't like it. She didn't like it. She didn't understand how he remained so calm in such a situation. The boy was satisfied with her answer. The priest's mana crawled towards him. The chain was activated towards the religious ambassador. The chain hit the priest. She knocked him off his feet. He began to be indignant because the organization dared to use magic against him. The guys were shocked. They told Victor that this was too much. Victor asked Vera if it was her doing. She replied that the magic worked automatically. The girl did not understand why it worked on the bishop, because magic works in a similar way when it reacts to a person's evil intentions. Victor then asked the boy if it was his doing. Al replied that he simply felt uncomfortable with the priest's mana. The people of the organization were very surprised. Victor's men noticed that a strange mana was emanating from the bishop's right hand. All noticed a strange ring on the priest. He asked about it. Vera noticed that the ring did not belong to the goddess. She said that an exorcism should be performed here. The man began to be indignant. How dare they think that he was breaking the rules? The priest resisted the Inquisition. He screamed that he did not want to die. The ring turned out to be a powerful cursed object. The bishop said that he did not know from whom he received it. This cursed technique was intended to harm the divine child and the people around him. The ring subsequently self-destructed. Al did not yet understand whether it was fortunate or not, but the bishop saw in him the remains of a disastrous child, and the curse that was in the boy was now being investigated by Usia. Victor said that he would not do anything now. He told Al not to attract attention to himself in the academy, because the organization did not consist only of Yoel and his servants. The hero agreed to carry out the order, because he was still going to use his power for the good of the kingdom. Victor didn't want to trust Albert. He knew that Falklands were unpredictable. He didn't know if it was the rumors about them that were affecting him or if it was something else. Yoel said goodbye to Albert. The boy joked, saying, "See you later," since he was already under suspicion, so it was only the first meeting. Yoel thanked him for talking to them. Falcone began to ponder the veracity of the story about the divine child, since nothing was said about it in the game. The hero understood that war could not be avoided in any case, and Sir Yoel's group would somehow deal with the main characters. Yoel asked Vera if she was interested in young Falcone. The girl replied that he was indeed curious. Vera wondered whether Albert was their ally or not. The boy decided to go through this world in his own way. There was no ceremony on the day of admission. There was only a reception desk, where Ao received a list of class assignments. The hero entered the second hall. He tried to understand what was supposed to happen here. The academic school turned out to be similar to the university from his past life. From the materials he received, he already knew the lectures and hours. He noted that the students had freedom, but in order to achieve something, they would have to work hard. The boy was illuminated by the mana of the heroes of light. He didn't understand why the main characters needed to shine like that. Daryl was feeling sorry for his uniform. Cecile replied that he needed to touch less. Al noticed Yoel's group and noted that the prince and the heroine were in a different class. Falcone wondered if the opening ceremony hadn't happened yet. How could it be different? He realized there were no chairs, so he would have to stand to listen. Suddenly, someone called him. The boys were shouting at him because he didn't hear Mrs. Claudia at all. The girl was indignant at Al's manners. She asked if he was really an aristocrat. The girl asked where he was from. Albert replied that he was from the border near the southern part of the Great Forest. He did not give his last name. The young men began to shout at him to quickly say his last name in front of the lady. The hero thought, "Who are these guys anyway? They have already drowned him." Claudia tried to get her bearings in the territory of the south and the Great Forest. She noted that the boy did not have any special magic, so she was not interested in the hero. The girl ordered her retinue to move on. Al didn't understand what had just happened. The hero noticed that a similar situation was happening everywhere. He remembered what his mother had told him about this. "Mom told me that it was important to create a group of strong aristocrats at the academy. In other words, to create a faction." The hero asked why it was so important. Mom answered that it was a good question and explained that it was easier that way. She said that if there is a faction in the academy, then communication becomes noticeably more effective. A chain is formed for completing the test, teacher-student association. In this way, aristocrats try to save face, so even if problems arise, everything is resolved. The teacher does not have to worry about the students because they will figure everything out themselves. It was at this time that meetings, negotiations, and truces were taking place in the Great Hall. It dawned on Alla that communities had already formed in the academy. This was how she understood the realization of students' freedom. The hero understood that he needed to avoid the main character's entourage now. He saw the event characters. Al understood that the factions with power should trigger the event story. Falcone would have liked to act alone, but he knew that would be strange, because people might wonder why he was always alone. The hero thought about who he could join. He wanted to find some simple group. Meanwhile, at Falcona Castle, Hobbs reminded the family that today was the day Mr. Al entered the academy. The boy's mother said that they shouldn't worry about it because she had taught him well. Besides, Albert is smart. He won't get lost. The man could not believe that the boy would now be surrounded by his school friends. However, the hero had some problems with this. The hero saw that everyone had already united. He tried to understand if it was because he was hiding his mana. He urgently needed to join some group. The boy noticed Yoel. He ordered not to approach him. His look was very frightening. Al was shocked. Looking at Albert, everyone did not see his real mana. They thought of him as a weakling that they did not need at all. However, other people from the southern lands noticed him. They saw the calm mana and immediately realized that he was a warrior of the Falcone family. The southern boys were worried that he wouldn't be interested in them. They thought about talking to him, although they thought that wouldn't help them either. They all thought it was better not to get involved in this. This is how Al's academic life began. The meeting was over. The boys needed to enter the dungeon. They were told that the dungeon was a specially built training ground where demons roamed the surface. After a demon was defeated, mana remained and the corpse itself disappeared. The guys had to defeat the boss located on the 5th floor and then, using magic, return back themselves. The mentor added that for those who have already participated in real battles, this training will not be difficult. Also, such an exercise is a good opportunity to learn the abilities of the group members. The hero remembered the tutorial of the dungeon in the game. He remembered that it would be very difficult for the main characters there. The hero felt the power of the dungeon even in the academy, but it did not scare him. The mentor asked where Ala's group was. The boy replied that he was alone. The man was surprised that no one wanted to take the hero. He decided to check his name on the list. He was very impressed. The mentor said that Falcone could go alone without a group. Al was disappointed in such a teacher. The heroes of light began to worry about the boy. They asked Sir Yoel if everything would be okay with Albert. Cecile suggested that it would be better to team up with him. Yoel reassured them not to worry. He added that giving one's name was a form of manners that Albert had not particularly expressed. The young man explained that the hero was a member of the Falcone family. The girl couldn't believe that Al was Falcone's warrior. Yoel added that there is no one among the sorcerers who does not know this family, especially in a bad light. The young man said that Albert was hiding his mana because his real power was great, although many people could use the basis of the magic body enhancement. Falcone is a strange family that holds back monsters in the Great Forest and goes beyond common sense. Each family has its own secret magic, and there are rumors that body enhancement is the secret of the Falcone family, but Albert's mana itself was worrying. Yoel explained that the reason he refused the Heroes of Light's offer was because he couldn't get rid of this worry. Daryl understood why Yoel looked at the boy so angrily. He also found Al's mana amount strange. Cecile added that she had noticed this too, suggesting that controlling mana might come naturally to Falcone. Yoel looked at the Heroes of Light and thought about them. He was confident in their strength, and they were considerate of others, although others did not think so. The young man did not want to be called a good-natured idiot. Yoel interrupted his train of thought. His task was to protect the spirit of the heroes. He called them with him. In front of them there should be a floor with a goblin. He asked them if they fought him in the east. The answer was affirmative. The girl explained that in the east, goblins and orcs were their main enemies. The boy added that it was better to fight them than to see his parents. Al was already on the 4th floor. He fought monsters hand to hand. The goblins rushed towards him with weapons. The hero admitted that he couldn't immediately determine how weak the goblins were. As the teacher said, the bodies of the opponents disappeared. Albert was relieved to see that the goblins were no longer appearing. But something was bothering him. The boy felt like he was missing something. Goblins never come out more than 7 at a time, and their fighting style was to rush at the enemy in a group, like a pack of dogs. With this understanding, fighting becomes easier. The difficulty level, as it seemed to the hero, was somewhere for beginners. Al noted that he did not feel the presence of teachers. He wondered what to do if an accident happened. Were the students the only ones responsible for everything that happened here? The hero froze, thinking. Suddenly, he recognized a special feeling. A shield flew at one of the academy students, knocking him off his feet. Miss Claudia's retinue rushed to the attack with a call to protect her at any cost. Her fellow group members responded that this was easy to say, but in reality, almost impossible. A huge armed goblin appeared before the boys. The closed council discussed the students who had entered the academy. They called them country bumpkins, hinting at their impudent arrogance in deciding to enter this institution. The council did not like the fact that the newcomers considered themselves equal to them. But they noted that the council had chosen the timing perfectly, since they had a goblin general. The people noted with regret that no one had died in their academy for a long time. The council decided to make a bet on how many people would die. The children stood in the dungeon in front of the goblin general, preparing to defend themselves. The monster turned his head to find out the situation for himself. The boys told Mrs. Claudia that the goblin general was wary of something. They hinted that they themselves needed to be careful. The girl objected to them. She said that there was only one goblin. She wanted to fight. The goblin general prepared for battle. The girl suddenly noticed a reflection of her fear in his eyes. She couldn't believe that, here in the academy's dungeon, they were going to die now. The frightened boy's nerves gave out, but he did not retreat, but rushed at the monster. They managed to grab him by the hand and stop him. It was Albert. He was trying to calm the boy down. The hero said that they had no reason to die. Falcone the warrior seemed very calm. Mrs. Claudia couldn't understand where this guy came from. Al began to wonder whether there was any point in them killing each other. He realized that it was they who had invaded the so-called dungeon. The boys couldn't believe that Albert had decided to talk to the goblin general. They didn't believe that the monster would understand the boy. Falcone recalled hearing somewhere that there were some non-humans who had consciousness. He turned to the goblin and said that he could listen to him if the general had any questions. The goblin didn't think long about the question. He screamed that he would kill them and rushed towards the boys. Claudia screamed. The monster swung his sword and attacked Al. Claudia was scared. She tried to watch carefully what was going to happen, but she decided to blink. Falcone managed to cut off the goblin's armed hand with magic and dodged the blow. While the girl was just beginning to close her eyes, Al was preparing to strike. The goblin general couldn't keep up with the boy. He only slowed down a little to assess the situation. At the moment when the girl's eyes just closed, Falcon struck his opponent. For Claudia, only a second had passed, and Al had already managed to defeat the monster, who did not understand anything. The boy's blow was very strong. The monster didn't even have a chance to prepare to block the blow. The goblin was defeated. The young man held himself as a warrior worthy of Falcone. He exhaled and noted to himself that he hadn't fought like this for a long time. Although his whole appearance said that for the boy this was just a warm-up, Allah's mana was more noticeable. Mrs. Claudia did not understand what had happened. Her retinue did not understand anything either. Albert asked if the boy who was hit by the goblin's shield was alive. The boys answered that he was alive, although he would have a bump. This satisfied the hero. The girl turned to Al. She once again clarified that the hero had arrived from the south, but Yoroi didn't let her finish. He said that he saved them. In return, he wanted the boys to keep quiet about him. The boy told them to forget that they met him, and the boys were not to know anything about the goblin. Claudia's retinue began to be indignant at how the hero could talk to her like that, but the girl rebuked her people. Mrs. Claudia agreed to fulfill Falcone's request, but this time she also wanted to thank the boy. The girl's retinue also expressed their gratitude to the hero. Al said goodbye to the guys and immediately ran away from the guys, which again surprised them very much. The hero noted that Claudia was also a warrior from the borders, and by her appearance you could not tell that she was an ordinary mob. But the boy decided that everything else did not apply to him. The girl's retinue wondered who Albert was. Claudia wondered that Al was from the north, and his main technique was close combat. She had almost guessed who Al was. Suddenly, the hero abruptly returned to the guys, because he forgot to ask them something. The girl was very scared of him. From Claudia's reaction, Falcone thought she was so surprised. He wanted to know if such things often happened in the dungeons or not. The boy admitted that he knew little about the dungeons and the academy itself. He was interested in what awaited him on the 5th floor. Hal had heard that sometimes mutated demons would appear in the dungeons, and the academy knew when that happened. The boy asked the boys if the teacher's words about how this test would not be a problem for those who had already been in battles seemed strange to them. The hero emphasized that in order to pass the test, one had to score too many points. Claudia replied that the capital aristocracy had a habit of looking down on the border aristocracy. The girl was angry that even at the academy, the teachers hated them. She was angry with them because they were playing with their lives. Al managed to earn points quickly. This time, he even surpassed the main characters. He hoped that Yoel would somehow figure it out. someone spoke very rudely to the hero. The teachers were outraged that he had managed to get through the dungeon first. They accused him of cheating and shouted that it was outrageous to act like that in the academy. Al didn't understand why all the screaming teachers were in this black mana. He replied that other teachers don't see it. The hero remembered that the Goblin general from the 4th floor also had something similar. Is black mana a sign of those who oppose the main characters? The boy wondered if he had gone too far. He decided that he hadn't gone far enough. He needed to check if his guesses were true. To all the teachers' indignation, he wondered how much longer they would shout. They continued to lecture until the next person came out of the dungeon. The test was passed without problems. The council wanted to know the number of victims. They did not understand what had gone wrong and asked again whether they had released a mutated demon or not. They answered that it had been there, and this was confirmed. The teachers could not believe that among the incoming students there was someone who could defeat this demon. They were frightened by the fact that aristocrats from the borders were capable of this. One of the council members decided that one of the teachers had interfered with the testing. Another replied that he didn't think so, but the situation was strange. The next one remembered that the last time the demon was dealt with by a member of the Haswell family. The council remembered that the students, although they were villagers, could compete with demons. However, they were worried about what exactly happened in that dungeon. Albert eavesdropped on their conversation. He learned that the council wanted to conduct a small investigation. Someone suggested that the guys themselves could soon do it. However, they decided to hurry. The hero was disappointed in the mental abilities of these people. He decided that they should definitely be event characters. The boy understood that even though they were not characters from the main story, if he went into their room now, he would be able to neutralize each of them. Al thought that they were of no use anyway. He compared them to bugs that crawl underfoot. The hero decided that it would be better without them. The girl in the revealing outfit said goodbye to one of the council members, who looked very pleased and embarrassed. Suddenly, someone grabbed him and dragged him around the corner. The man was roughly pinned to the floor. The stranger asked him if the man knew who he was. Without waiting for an answer, the stranger said that he was a man who was connected to an aristocratic family. The man screamed and was immediately silenced with more force. He was warned that if he raised his voice again, another finger would be cut off. The frightened teacher did not understand why he became a victim. The hero replied that they had caused him trouble, so he would return the favor. A few days later, students found the body of one of the teachers in the dungeon on the 1st floor. It looked as if he had stumbled upon a goblin. His drinking habits, which he tried to hide, were well known. Since a family investigation was undesirable, the teacher's death was ruled an accident. A few days later, another teacher went missing. The man's disappearance was reported by his family. The investigation was difficult, and the teacher's family demanded compensation. The possibility that a relative could have committed the crime was also considered. Death and disappearance happened one after another, so rumors began to circulate in the academy. The most suspicious were the surviving members of the council. One was worried about what had really happened to their comrades. The other calmed him down, explaining it was all a coincidence. But the men objected to their comrade. He said that the academy was already betting on which of the teachers would be next. They were indignant at how students could play with other people's lives, forgetting that they themselves had recently done the same. The men wanted to tell all the members of the faction about what had happened. Albert, who had been eavesdropping on them the whole time, thought to himself that these teachers were trying in vain, because everything had already been decided for them. The councilman told his comrade sadly that the one who had bet on them was their leader. The man realized with horror that their lives were already put into circulation. They were doomed. In the end, the bet failed. There were illegal substances scattered around the teachers, and there were signs of an overdose as evidenced by the signs of a fight. Therefore, further investigation was stopped. People didn't understand what was going on. Were the shadows intervening to cleanse the factions? There were many rumors, but none of them stuck. And the teacher who came to replace the previous ones turned out to be an event character from a free quest. They were only needed to fulfill the conditions. The boys started going to school. During the classes, Albert analyzed that the black mana meant the main character's enemies. He decided to perceive it as a sign. The boy remembered that when he touched the black mana, he felt evil intent. The same thing happened to the deacon. However, the two did not know the names of the main characters. All assumed that in this world, everything was different from that game. Someone knocked on the hero's door. It was Vera. She asked Sir Albert to come with her. The hero saw the girl's chains. He said that everything was somehow unsettled again. He asked if they would drag him into the carriage again. They answered no. The girl replied that today they were going to the Academy's hairdressing salon. The boy was a little confused. Al assumed that it would most likely be about recent incidents. After all, if you think about it even a little, then indeed it all looked suspicious. But the hero should not be under suspicion, since he erased all traces of mana. He also noted that Vera still has not bound him with her chains. The boy, asking himself, continued to think that, in the worst case, they would forgive him if he told them about the black mana. He admitted that it was all his habits, killing demons. He felt uneasy in the room. Vera reported to Victor that she had brought Albert. The man appreciated her actions. Al noted to himself with sarcasm that Victor, as always, was unperturbed. There was a stranger sitting in the chair. He was ready to examine Falcone. The boy became wary. The hero felt uneasy under the stranger's intense gaze. The elf glanced at the boy. She noted to herself that he had a rather cheeky expression on his face. She liked it. Al was frightened by her appearance and decided that she was a monster. He could no longer suppress his mana. The hero tried to understand who was sitting in front of him. He understood that it was not a person, it was something strange. Therefore, the boy decided that she was a monster. This conclusion was helped by his intuition, which usually did not fail him. Mana Allah reached its peak. Vera launched her chains at Vilbert. The hero noticed this out of the corner of his eye. He didn't think long and instantly struck the attacker, using the power of speed. There was enough time for him to run around the girl and attack her from behind. Vera did not expect the blow at all, which turned out to be very strong. The girl fell unconscious on the floor. The strongest light mana emanated from her. The hero did not expect this. Her light blinded the others. The boy began to justify himself to the members of the organization. He said that it was simply self-defense. He admitted that in the Falcone family, it was customary to kill before you were killed. Victor understood him. He emphasized that Albert could have recently allowed himself not to kill, but simply neutralize someone like Vera. The elf laughed in response to Al's words. She asked him if he wanted to kill her. She told him to cool down, because he himself understood that it was useless. The girl condescendingly called him a boy. The boy wondered if there was a monster that could compare to Father Falcone. The hero noticed the girl's long ears. He assumed she was an elf, and then doubted it. Al did not try to calm down. His mana looked aggressive. The boy looked at the stranger. He noted that she looked terribly like a doll. Her eyes were red, like fresh blood. He tried to gather as much information as possible from the observation, but he was interrupted. The girl mentioned his father, Brian. The stranger said that Father Falcone could get to her. Albert asked if she knew his father. The boy realized that the elf was referring to the period of his father's life before he had yet taken over the status of head of the family. The hero tried to understand whether she meant how his father fought or something else. Victor turned to Mrs. Clay. He wanted to tell her that this was not the best subject for conversation. Clay replied that the man was always so boring. The elf explained that a small amount of mana was left in the room. She figured out that 2 people had been killed in that room by that kid. Victor asked the hero if he had anything to say in response to this. Albert said that these people had attacked him, and he had simply responded in kind. But the boy already understood that there was no point in making excuses, because he had not even sensed Mrs. Clay's presence before entering the room. Al realized that the difference in strength was too great. He understood that his fate and what would become of him depended on the mood of this girl. Victor said that destruction-class monsters can appear in the dungeons, and Albert not only saved Claudia's group, but also defeated one of these monsters. Victor decided to explain right away that Claudia had not broken her promise she had made in the dungeon. The organization's people had simply read her memories with magic. The man added that Albert, albeit indirectly, had reasons to take revenge. Victor reminded that the boy himself knows that the capital is not a border, so their ways of solving problems will not go unnoticed. The boy agreed with the words of the organization's leader. The man said that they already had a plan to catch those teachers, but Albert interfered with all of this. Victor asked why the hero interfered. Falcone didn't know what to answer, so he remained silent. He was thinking. Mrs. Clay also waited with interest for Al's answer. The hero responded as he had planned, that he did not like these people. He explained that they emitted black mana, but added that the priest emitted more black mana. The elf really liked the boy's answer. She smiled broadly. Victor didn't understand what black mana they were talking about. He asked if Al saw something that even Vera hadn't noticed. Clea put Victor in his place. She asked him to stop interrogating the boy. The elf summed up that they had found out something about the hero. The girl claimed that Albert was an apostle. Clay suggested the idea that the organization should tell the church that the boy was simply protecting a divine child, then they would not punish Al. The hero pondered his new title of apostle. Victor became indignant. He reminded Clay that there were no predictions about Albert's appearance. Therefore, it cannot be said that the boy is an apostle. Apostles were people the church believed existed. Apostles were the protectors of the divine child. Albert decided that the elf monster named Clea was pretending to know about the black mana. Clea was disappointed that the hero didn't understand anything either. Yoel introduced Daryl and Cecily to Albert Falcone. The young man said that due to certain circumstances, they needed to accept him into their group. The boy introduced himself and asked to be called simply Al. He allowed the boys not to talk about their families because he had already heard that people were tired of relationships based on family status. Daryl decided that this was unfair, but agreed, because Falcone insisted. The hero introduced himself as a member of an aristocratic family from the East. Cecily was also from the East. Heroine Sveta told the boy that he was incredible. She looked at Al, but saw him as just an ordinary person. The girl suggested that hiding one's mana was the Falcone family's secret technique. Daryl said that her thoughts were very crude, but the boy reassured them. The hero explained that it was not a secret technique. It was just that, without this battle in the Great Forest, it would have been very difficult for him. He admitted that he would need to learn long-range magic. However, Albert's family decided for some reason to develop in close combat techniques. Daryl thought it was very strange. Now, Cecily said that he was being rude. Falcone bowed to the boys and said that he was glad to be friends with them, but he had to run some business, so he left the heroes. The boys said that if he had time, they would like him to teach them how to control mana. The hero left, accompanied by Vera. The boy reported to Victor that he had allowed the heroes of light to remember him. The man said that now Al should appear next to the heroes of light if something happens, and if a hero sees black mana, he should immediately let the organization know about it. And now Falcone had to move only with Vera. Albert replied that he would follow their instructions only if they provided him with information about the divine child. That was all he asked for. The hero didn't like what was happening. He thought it was wrong. He was filled with anger, but he couldn't give in to it. He had to use only what he could. The boy silently told Victor not to think that he had tamed him. Al was serious. The boys left. Victor considered Albert an unofficial apostle. He ordered not to share information with the other group, believing that their group would figure it out on its own. The man asked Clea if what they had planned was okay. The elf assured Victor that everything was fine. She called the man's suspicions stubbornness. Clay assured him that they would not tell the other elders, nor the church. The girl wanted to make Albert her trump card in an emergency. She laughed at the genius and thoughtfulness of her plan. Victor was confused. The man noted to himself that the elf rarely showed interest in people, but she treated Albert in a special way. The life expectancies of Clay and Victor were different, so the man decided that he could not understand what the girl was thinking. But as a subordinate, Victor had to remain silent and follow her orders. The elf was called Lazy Clay. She was an elder who controlled the shadows of the royal family. She was one of those who violated various foundations, so she decided to live among humans. In the main plot of the game, she should not be encountered. However, she is described as a significant character who appears and disappears in different places. Detailed information about her was not provided. The heroes of light were walking together when Daryl had a question for Cecily. The young man admitted, although he didn't know why, that he had a feeling that Al would be hostile towards them. The girl replied that she had a good impression of the guy. She asked where Daryl got such feelings from. The young man himself did not know this, but he said that he had already felt something similar to that fateful time. Cecily rebuked her friend by saying that it was just a stupid assumption to say that Al was the same as someone else. She was angry with Daryl. The guy didn't expect his girlfriend to react like that. He apologized, assuring her that it was just an assumption. He attributed his feelings and sensations to rumors about Falcone that he had once heard. The girl suggested that Daryl talk to Albert while he was still not far from them. The guy said that he didn't really know his classmate, so he couldn't judge anything about him. Cecily didn't say it out loud, But since childhood, she, like Daryl, also had some premonitions, which were perhaps not as strong as her friends. But besides caution, the girl felt that they would go together with Alamy. It was the first time she had such a contradiction on a sensual basis. Cecily was torn between her thoughts, ready to agree with Daryl's caution, but she knew she was the same way. The girl decided not to look ahead. However, she also knew that Daryl's bad feeling had never failed him. From here on, everything began. Divine child, royal family shadows, and apostle are connections that are not in the game. The hero was in his room. He mused that in most games, after completing the tutorial, you can freely move on with the story. He wondered how the main characters were treated in this world. He noticed that the heroes of light were being closely watched. And what's more, Yoel was taking them to different places as a count who had connections with the city's aristocracy. The guy introduced the heroes to representatives of the royal family. At the same time, the kingdom and the church are considering allowing the godson and His Highness Adam to strengthen their friendship for the glory of 1,000 years. However, that incident in which the prince challenged the protagonist to a fight must have left a rather bad impression. Al recalled that initially there were no adventurer guilds in this world, although they were promised in the game. But there was an aristocracy which seemed to act as a messenger. The hero was interested in how the elements that exist in games could be combined in this world. After all, the hero always strives to complete quests for rewards. Vera came to Mr. Al. She asked what he would order her to do today. Falcone reminded the girl once again that she could address him simply without his name, without the particle sir. Vera said that she could not simply call him by his name, since she had been given instructions to be his follower. The girl was principled. The hero noted that Vera was still standing her ground. Half a month had passed, but nothing had changed. He told the girl to stop, but she continued. Al was already thinking of simply accepting that she called him master. Falcone noted to himself that Vera was acting rather aloof. Although the boy was not delighted with all this, he was glad that the girl carried out all his orders. Albert wondered if it was possible that there was some sort of collar around her neck. The hero answered the girl that he would be busy checking people with black mana for now. But there were a couple of other things that interested him. The boy wanted to visit a city that belonged to another people. Vera accepted his report. The hero came to the hotel, Angus. The second owner of the hotel, at Angus's, was Vargas. He noted that the gentleman had not visited them for a long time. The man asked about the hero's plans, whether he came here again to hunt street bandits. Vera wondered what Vargas meant. But Al didn't need these street thugs anymore. The hero greeted the owner. He had a few questions for him. Vargas said that, thanks to Albert, life in the area had become much easier. The man offered the boy a task for a special fee. Falcone naively replied that he simply wanted to help people. Vera did not agree with his statement, although she refrained from commenting. The guy said he wanted to ask Vargas about the French deacon and Mary's dead spirit. Al looked very friendly when asking this question, which emphasized his character as a detective and his belonging to the tough Falcone family. The man said it was a very sad story. He was not sure about the deacon or Mary, but he knew for sure that the church was haunted by dead souls. He said there were rumors that the priest was present at the initiative of the People's District. Vargas added that there were also rumors that there were many victims, but the church either denies these rumors or they are true. But the innkeeper noted that the church building is still standing. The man also told of rumors that they wanted to send someone to this church who had experience in the sacred arts and who would study at the academy. However, Vargas did not know whether this was true or not. He only heard rumors about it. Someone in the cathedral was very surprised that there were dead souls in the church. The bishop thought it was all very unfortunate. They, too, were determined to send someone from their side who could fight. The bishop will offer this quest to the protagonists so that they can see the practical side of sacred arts. He saw that the heroes of light have mana with a relatively strong combat nature. The boys were willing to take the task. They wanted to know how to use this mana in battle, although they did not deny the sacred art. The bishop said that he did not care, because it was a natural consequence of those who fight seeking power. The man said that this was all part of the goddess's plan. Albert thanked Vargas for the information. He replied that it was all a trifle. The man added that the next time Falcone came, he should take the beauty with him, Vera. The hero understood that this whole story was like a quest. He noted that the content was similar to a game. The boy noted that the method of receiving orders was limited and the clients were biased. Al suggested that perhaps the Oracle could not come to terms with processing quests. The hero wondered what his duty was. Vera watched Falcone's behavior closely. The girl admitted to herself that she had become accustomed to working with Albert and to his silent contemplation and to the fact that there were no gaps in his situation. Vera was assigned to watch the hero and restrain him at the right moment, but she herself did not understand the point of a guard like her, whom Falcone could defeat so easily. The girl remembered how Victor had ordered her to watch Albert. The man had then relayed Mrs. Clay's order. Vera could not forgive her defeat, and this tormented her. Al told her that they would now go to an abandoned church. For the sake of decency, the boy asked Vera if she minded. The girl reminded that Falcone does not need her permission, because she is simply his follower. The girl also added that Albert was always taller than her. The hero did not like these speeches very much. They annoyed him a little, and he felt awkward. The boy accepted the girl's answer. The hero and Vera walked along the narrow streets of the stranger's district. The inhabitants of the area appeared to be in dire straits. They looked hungry, sick, and wild. The children looked askance at the strangers who had arrived. Al noted that there were no more thugs, but it seemed that there were more and more people who had nowhere to go. These people were unable to join the Shadow Society, and the church that supported them was destroyed. It seemed logical to the hero how everything turned out. The boy asked Vera what she thought about the current state of affairs in the outskirts. The girl replied that she had no special thoughts on this matter. She added that reality is reality is reality. So for the weak and defenseless, being victims is a natural outcome. Albert noted that although Vera had a good sense of smell, she didn't know how to hide. He noticed that the girl was different from Mr. Yole and the others. She did not look like the native capital aristocrats. The hero said that if her words had been addressed to the warriors on the battlefield, he would have agreed with her. However, in the capital, he considered them highly inappropriate. After all, the capital's aristocrats will never fight on the battlefield for the common people. On the contrary, they only squeeze everything out of them, introducing taxes and new laws. The boy asked what kind of state could there be without a peaceful life for the people. Al admitted that he could not simply ignore all these shortcomings of the capital's aristocrats, and he really missed the simplicity and clarity of life on the outskirts. Vera tried to explain to Falcone that in the capital, fighting had a completely different meaning. She was sure that the hero himself had already realized that the government here was very different from those operating on the outskirts. The girl added that the alleys are the final destination of those who have lost their battle and lost their peace. She said that was all. The boy did not know what to answer Vera, although he did not agree with her. He suggested leaving this topic and continuing on their way. The hero understood that mutual understanding could not be achieved with superficial words. In fact, Al was trying to secretly find out the truth. He understood that he had most likely touched something important to Vera too deeply, and it seemed that the hero had put too much pressure on her. But he hoped that the girl would eventually stop following him when a conflict arose between the main character and Prince Adam, and her attention would be completely switched to them. Falcone assumed that Vera was targeting candidates for Prince Adam's personal guard, so they both just needed to be patient for a little while. Vera was very angry with Albert Falcone. She believed that no matter how beautiful his speeches were, they were just empty words for someone as privileged as he was. The girl believed that reality could not be changed, and no one would come to the rescue, because the defeated would always be crushed. She did not like what she was convinced of, but she could not resist her faith. Vera remembered herself as a child, a little crying girl. In her heart, she was angry at what she considered to be an ignorant upstart, Albert Falcone. Near the abandoned church, the heroes of light felt unclean mana. Daryl said that there were undead creatures in the eastern Grand Canyon as well, but this was the first time he had felt them so clearly. The man told the main characters to be careful. It was the commander of the combat unit of the Wallace Knights, but it seemed to him that Daryl and Cecily did not need warning. Cecily naively replied that they were merely a burden to the glorious knights of the church order. The Wallace Knights Order was a combat group that was under the direct control of the church and used sacred techniques in combat. Officially, they were supposed to fight the undead and other such monsters. However, there were rumors that the Wallace Knights also re-educated those who went against the teachings of the goddess. The commander was amused by Cecily's words. He noted that, despite their youth, both main characters were well prepared, which really impressed him. Daryl wanted to make sure that the rumors about the middle-class undead were true this time. He wondered if their magic would actually work against her. Commander Wallace didn't deny the rumors. He asked if the boys had ever encountered the undead. The guy replied that they had encountered low-level zombies and skeletons. Commander Wallace said that, in fact, their number of people was excessive to fight the undead. They could not only destroy the undead, but also bind them with a barrier. The man suggested that the guys try this idea. Cecily replied that all of Daryl's words were just jokes. The girl said that the order had already accompanied them against their will, so they did not want to cause unnecessary inconvenience. Commander Wallace reassured, or even more alarmed, the girl by explaining to her that the Archbishop had originally instructed the order to study the mana of heroes. The man once again asked Cecily not to worry, since it was all on their way anyway. Albert discovered that the church had already taken control of all the undead in the abandoned building. However, he suggested Vera to hide her presence anyway, just in case. It seemed a little unusual to the girl to hide. The hero just wanted to take a quick look into the damned building, but everything had already started. It seemed as if the events themselves were pulling him in. He asked Vera if she had heard anything about those people. The girl said that they were knights of the cathedral. He assumed that it had something to do with Yoel establishing contacts in different directions. Vera added that it all looked like the cathedral was preparing to study the special magic and mana of Daryl and Cecily. Al suddenly asked if they really had some kind of special magic or unique mana. Vera didn't understand how the boy could not know this. She couldn't understand how he, a Falcone who was good at mana control, hadn't noticed their unusual mana. The hero shook his head, indicating that he hadn't seen it at all. He admitted that he was too focused on the goddess's blessing, so he didn't pay enough attention to their mana. However, Al realized that in this world, the main characters were considered special, so it was likely that they could use unique magic. Albert asked Vera if she had ever seen their magic with her own eyes. The girl replied that it was not very good to spread someone else's information behind their back, but noted that both of them had a light in their magic that was similar to sacred art. The main characters themselves call it white mana. The girl remembered that Daryl and Cecily came to Yoel and his guys and confessed that from some point, when they started using magic, white mana began to appear in her. This white mana greatly enhanced Cecily and Daryl's magic and also gave it a healing effect. When the main characters asked about it in the church in their homeland, they were told that this white mana was similar to a sacred technique. And even after studying many records and oral traditions, the guys could not find out anything. Theriel controlled the white flame. As for Lady Cecily, there was no noticeable change in wind magic, but her skill was quite high. Al tried to remember something about the white flame from the game. He thought it was something like a secret move of the main character in the final part. The boy also remembered that it was a long animation. It seemed to him that important characters, both enemies and allies, had at least one such technique. He also tried to remember what secret technique the main character had. He assumed it was wind, but he couldn't remember exactly. Oogie is Daryl's secret technique. It was a powerful finishing move that could be learned in the final part of the game. For some characters, it was necessary to fulfill special conditions or go through special events to obtain it. Al wondered if secret techniques could appear in this world as special abilities. Vera announced to the hero that Mr. Daryl and the others were already inside the church. Falcone thought that they couldn't get any closer, so he suggested that the girl try to find a place from where they could see all these events. The abandoned church was in great disrepair, but the statue of the goddess seemed untouched. Suddenly, a feminine creature appeared and rose into the air. She looked like the dead Mary. Daryl asked if it was undead. Commander Wallace replied that it was no longer the undead itself, but merely a shell, and if this creature was treated like a human, it would take advantage of it. The main character was confused. The man said that the most important thing is for the heroes of light to understand this. He told Daryl and Cecily to keep this in mind for the future. Cecily was dissatisfied with Commander Wallace's behavior. She understood that he and the church people were sure that the main character's mana was very similar to sacred art. She didn't like that they started all this just to confirm their guess. The girl was also confused by the fact that even the Archbishop and the Holy Knights were involved in this. A large-scale operation for this seemed inappropriate to her. The girl complained that Daryl was completely useless at such moments. If he had no premonition, then he had no doubts at all. Cecily knew that her friend was too straightforward, in both a good and a bad way. The hero showed too much respect for the order. The girl also recalled that Yoel had established connections with the church and aristocrats. She acknowledged that for aristocrats this was simply necessary. But everyone they met was too friendly to them. It was as if they were reading a script. She was troubled by some strange feeling. It was still very disturbing. The girl did not understand why it was clinging to her thoughts so much. The undead were still threatening. They were waiting for something without attacking. Commander Wallace noticed that this enemy was not one to actively attack. He assumed that there was another undead creature that was hiding and already on guard. Commander Wallace asked Daryl to use his magic on the enemy. The boy did not immediately understand the man's request. The protagonist wasn't sure it was a good idea. He was afraid the monster would escape. The warrior assured the young man that it was unlikely to happen with an opponent of that level. Commander Wallace supported Daryl and reassured him so that the boy would not be shy. The hero agreed and decided to begin the task. Daryl used white flame and launched it at the enemy. The undead did not even think about healing. The monster did not see this as a threat. The enemy wanted to put up a block, but the ball of white flame managed to touch him. Suddenly, a light illuminated the entire building, which grew. An explosion occurred. The roof of the already abandoned church was destroyed by the explosion. Commander Wallace was worried about the boys. He asked if they were wounded. The main characters replied that they were fine. Cecily began to scold Daryl, because everything should have its limits. The young man began to justify himself and apologize, because he did not plan this. The main character did not expect that everything would turn out like this. Commander Wallace understood that the situation was becoming serious. The Order and the main characters urgently needed to find out what it was. Albert saw everyone leaving the half-ruined church. The hero did not understand what it was and how it happened. Al thought that Daryl should not have had such powerful mana, but his destructive power was incredible. The guy realized that this was no longer the level of individual magic. It was a real weapon of mass destruction. Vera interrupted the boys' thoughts. The girl said that they should inform Mr. Victor about what had happened as soon as possible. The hero replied that Vera was right. He told her to go to Victor. Al himself wanted to stay and conduct an inspection. They could return earlier. Vera was not happy with this. The girl said that as a servant, she was obliged to accompany him, so she said she would go with him and help him with the inspection of the territory. Al did not understand why Vera was so irritable. Falcone were always impatient in this regard. The boy offered to wait until everyone left so that they could go in. The picture he saw amused the hero. He said with annoyance that it turned out as expected. They saw how small children, residents, the area of strangers, who were clearing away the rubble in the church. The guy saw the bright mana of the children. Vera stood ready for battle, her mana focused. The girl said that if Al wanted, she could disperse them all. The hero stopped her and wondered why she was so eager to disperse them. Falcone assured the girl that there was no need for that. Vera thought sarcastically that Albert himself was constantly dispersing everything he didn't like. The hero took some coins and threw them on the floor so that the children would notice. The most active boy noticed first. One of the younger boys happily rushed towards the money, but a lively boy abruptly stopped him. Falcone decided that the lively boy was the most important of this whole pack of poor people. Vera didn't understand what Al wanted to do next. The hero looked attentively at the boys, the eldest of whom stood ready to protect the younger ones. The boy thought about it. He analyzed the lively boy. The hero saw that he had, although weak, the ability to control mana. Al decided that the boy already had some combat experience. Falcone's Perceptor's Act is Falcone also noted that after the main child spoke, everyone around froze and prepared to act, as if they were waiting for his command. Al assumed that this boy was teaching the other children how to defend themselves. He noted that the child was very smart. The boy spoke first. He asked Albert, apologizing for the sake of seeming politeness, what he wanted. The hero seemed to be thinking about something. Then he grabbed the boy by the shoulders. The hero gave some kind of consent, as if there was some kind of deal. Al said he was buying them all. He asked how many they wanted. The frightened boy did not understand what was happening. He clearly did not expect this, and was terrified. Vera watched everything that happened. She also didn't understand what was happening now, but it clearly made her very excited. The residents are surprised and do not understand what the hero is talking about. He replies that their concerns are understandable, but assures them that it will also be beneficial for them. While he was speaking, something was heading towards him at great speed. The guy quickly dodges the blow, but the weapon still scratches his cheek. The girl who attacked him, angry at his words, menacingly asks him to repeat them. Al thinks that he has touched a sore spot with her and asks Vera to calm down. She screams, asking that he is not going to involve the children in this, which is why they look scared. The girl mockingly says that for Al, the inhabitants are just people without will. She says with a crazy smile that if one breaks, it's okay because you can just buy new ones. She also suggests that Al would prefer to replace them with something else. The guy, frightened, jumps onto one of the beams of the house and remembers that someone said that magic created by a person himself is a reflection of his inner world, so it is different for everyone. Because of this, he does not understand what is holding Vera in chains. The girl continues the attack, but Al quickly dodges the weapon. The guy understands that at the moment it is better not to touch the chains, since this time Eva is fighting seriously, without the slightest mercy. Seeing the frightened children, he thinks that he cannot delay. The chains quickly head straight for Al, and he apologizes to the girl for not being angry at him as she died, while creating a shield around himself. Due to the rapid attacks, the earth shakes, which greatly frightens the inhabitants. Al understands that he can't even counterattack, because all his strength is spent only on defense. Vera, turning to the guy, reminds him that he asked her what she thought about the state of affairs in the backyards, adding that he condemned the capital's aristocrats and said that they were ruining the peace of the common people. With tears in her eyes, the girl screams that people are not his property. Al begins to realize something, and at this time, Vera comes to her senses and does not understand why she is fighting with the guy. She remembers in the child's mind that the hero said that he wanted to capture the children, but at the same time she understands that she is on a mission and she is his subordinate. The girl no longer understands what is happening and calls her parents. At this time, Al, dodging the chains, heads towards Vera, surprising her. Almost getting close, the girl attacks the couple with chains right in the hero's face. However, he grabs the weapons with his hand, which also shocks his subordinate, and wraps them around his forearm. The chains scratch Al's arm, leaving multiple wounds. He says that he expected this from Vera and prepares his fist to strike. The guy hits the girl hard right in the stomach. Vera faints from the blow right into the hero's arms, and he realizes that he overdid it a little, thinking that the girl held up well but was too unstable. Al complains that the shackles are more problematic than he thought, remembering that dealing with the royal shadows openly will lead to death, and if Clay appears, then it's all over. Although even Yoel and his men will surround him, then he will not have a chance. The guy lifts Vera up and, turning to some boy, apologizes for scaring him and asks if he wants to go with him, offering money. The man with the eye patch sternly tells Al that he is disappointed with him and that he does not like this method. The hero replies that the man misunderstood and asks to prepare a larger room. The man says that there is such a room in another building and asks why the guy needs it, because he doesn't just want to let the girl rest. Al replies that he wants to check something and asks for a room for a month. In the room, Al used purification magic, which is why the man says that he expected the magician to be able to use it endlessly, to which the hero replies that, after all, magic is his specialty. The owner, leaving, warned the guy not to do anything bad. Afterwards, Al looked at the boy and said that he had made him wait. He specifies that the child's name is Silas and introduces himself to him. The boy asks the hero what he wants from the villagers. Al replies that he didn't express himself that way earlier and didn't intend to acquire them in the literal sense, although considering that he is taking on their life and maintenance, then one can assume so. Adding that next time he would be more careful, otherwise Vera would attack him again. He tells the boy that he wants to hire the villagers for a while and their job is to collect information. Al asks them to collect any rumors they hear and pass them on to him, to which the boy asks where exactly they should collect the information. The hero reflects that as a spy among the aristocracy or underground groups, if they are exposed, they will die, and realizes that Silas has seen too many children who have suffered such a fate. The guy calms the child down by saying that it won't be espionage, because he has a lot of acquaintances in the city, and if he needs information, he can just ask them. Silas asks what they should do then, and thinks what Al said was creepy. The hero replies that he simply needs to gather information, that is, collect rumors, find out who has what problems, and he needs the residents to merge with the locals in the people's area and listen to what they are talking about. The boy says he understands everything, but he is afraid that even among foreigners they are considered outcasts, so it will be difficult to blend in with the crowd and penetrate the popular area. Al thinks that with the help of everyday magic, even a guy like Silas can look clean, and says that people from the slums are judged by their appearance and manners and makes something up. He suggests that if the residents are brought into order, they can at least partially disguise themselves, adding that Silas answers confidently and keeps calm. The hero assures that he will provide everyone with everything they need. Al says that the man with the armband, Bargus, is one of the most influential people in the area, and if the villagers imagine themselves as subordinates to the nobleman staying with him, they will have an easier time finding work. That's why the hero wants them to gather information. Silas, frightened, doesn't understand anything and thinks that if they simply became Al's property, it would be more logical. The boy says that he has many questions, but from their work, what exactly does the hero get from this? And it is difficult for him to believe that there is not some hidden intent here. Al replies that he understands that this may seem suspicious, but it is really important and necessary, and therefore suggests setting a clear deadline. He adds that Silas has an attractive appearance and may be haunted by danger in the form of bad people, which greatly frightens the boy. Al recalls that the child is now about 11 years old, and he doubts that he will be able to live peacefully until at least 13. The boy recalls that he had received such offers more than once before and had even been persecuted. Some children were happy when they found work, only to be found mutilated a few days later. One of the children had no eyes, no nose, no teeth, and no signs of life. Silas says that the residents live in such conditions, and Al assures that they cannot live like this forever. The boy is angry at the hero, calling him an arrogant aristocrat in his thoughts and that he knows about their lives. He shouts that he understands everything perfectly well himself and does not want to hear this from Al. The hero looked at Silas with a terrifying gaze, which made him very scared. Al says that reality is cruel for everyone and asks why the boy does not fight against the injustice and cruelty of this world, adding that he doesn't know much about the residents, but Silas doesn't know anything about him either, and the boy doesn't even imagine the injustice with which he lives. The frightened child, trembling, says that he doesn't know. The hero says that all the residents are suffering and, looking at Vera, adds that she has also been through a lot. Al says he's one of those who live on the outskirts, near the great forest to the south, and asks if Silas knows about this forest. The boy replies that he heard that this is a place where monsters live, and where you can get rare magic stones of high purity. The monsters of the great forest are insectoid creatures without feelings. The defeated can become their food, and sometimes they lay eggs inside the victim, turning it into a living incubator. To fight such monsters, people, unfortunately, had to use their methods. That is, if a person is killed, then people will take revenge, and if they are not killed, then people will strike first. Hal apologizes for the fact that his words might have angered the boy. However, he adds that Silas should remember that if he does not watch his words, he too can respond, and the boy obeys him. The hero apologizes again, saying that as an outsider he shouldn't have said that. He bows to the boy, but Silas also bows and says that he should apologize, because Al said everything correctly. The boy is surprised that the aristocrat apologized to someone like him, and that for him, everyone is equal. It doesn't matter whether a person is noble or a beggar, either you kill or you are killed. This is the same way of thinking that the monsters of the great forest adhere to. Silas asks Al to answer one of his questions, and the hero agrees. The boy mentions that he needs to fight injustice, but the residents are already fighting for their lives every day and asks how they can continue this fight. The hero replies that everything is easy and tells them to just run away, adding that there is no point in fighting a battle that cannot be won because if life is a war, then one should simply run away and survive. This is not the same as simply running away from one's weakness. Silas clarifies that they need to leave the royal capital. Al gives a positive answer, saying that if the capital is too cruel, one should find another place, and there is no need to stay in the slums. There is plenty of land in the south, and if you look, you can definitely find work. Suddenly, Al realizes that he was too frank, apologizes, and asks to forget everything that was said. But Silas only replies that he did not attach any importance to it, because people like them should not dream of another life. The hero replies that if the boy hates something, he asks to say so, but it could cost him his life. But if he remains silent, no one will understand, especially if we are talking about people. Although Alu himself did not have the courage to do this, and he remembers how some said that escape was impossible, He tells Silas that running away is actually an element of redemption and asks if the villagers receive support from Deacon Franz. The boy answers yes, but does not understand how Al knows about this. The hero replies that he simply guessed during the conversation, and, in fact, he knew that Deacon Franz and Mary would die, but did not intervene. When he later found out about it, he was shocked. It turns out that Deacon taught children from the slums and helped them find honest work, and perhaps looting an abandoned church had a completely different meaning. Al says he didn't know Deacon very well in life, but what he did really impressed him, adding that helping those who are weak is the duty and honor of aristocrats. The hero had his regrets, and it was the meeting with Silas and the others that made him put one thought into action. He wants to create a guild. The main characters are watched by both the shadows and the kingdom and the church, so everything will be fine with them. However, there are important tasks and events that they do not participate in. It is impossible to track everything on your own. Therefore, Al wants to involve children from the slums to collect information, because they also have connections. Perhaps the information obtained will help to remember the essence of quests, so it is possible to prevent problems before they arise. This is Al's idea. Silas begins a series of questions about whether Al is going to use force against them. The guy replies that he can get annoyed, but he will never use physical force. The second question is whether the hero will give them food and shelter, to which he receives a positive answer. The third question is whether Al is going to give the children to bad people, to which he replies that he never even thought about it. Silas worries that the villagers may not live up to the hero's expectations, but he reassures him that if they try, it won't be a big deal. The boy asks if they have the right to run away, and Al says that if it is for the sake of survival, then yes, but adds that living does not mean simply running away from the fight. The boy says that he is also holding back for now, but if he cannot achieve his goal, he will choose the path of escape and survival. He tells the boy that he respects those who know their limits and can stop in time. Silas is worried and thinks that Al's views and priorities are too different from his, and he doesn't even know what he can trust in his words. However, he sees that the hero does not look like a liar, and he just wants to believe him. After Franz passed away, their situation worsened dramatically, and there were almost 20 people in their group, but now there are much fewer children left. Al asks to say a few words, that we need to stop whining. Children have a hard life, but not only they. In peacetime, respect is important, but in battle, no one should be spared, be it the capital or the outskirts. War is the same everywhere. He reaches out his hand to the boy to seal the deal. Silas does the same and thinks that he still can't understand Al, but that's why he won't put his hopes on him so that everyone can survive. The priest says that everything is over and now she is safe and the goddess will protect her. The woman praises her for helping her mother. The uncle says he will sort everything out. Some people were shouting not to let her go and threatening to do something to her for disobedience. Suddenly, the girl woke up, sitting on the ground outside. In winter, she was wearing only a dirty dress and no shoes, huddling up, trying to keep warm. It was Vera. She was from the northern outskirts. Both her parents were nobles, but they did not know how to use combat magic. They lived an ordinary life, working as artisans, creating magical artifacts. However, her parents died in the same accident. The world around her changed completely. She became a street child and wandered the streets of the city. At present, Vera, standing on one knee and bowing her head, asks Al for forgiveness for trying to harm him. The guy says that nothing happened between them, and isn't that enough for her? Silas left before that to call the others. What scares Ala most is who stands behind Vera, including monsters and power. The girl stands up and says that she is resigning from her position as the shadow of the royal family after this matter. The guy asks her why she was going to leave so easily, to which she replies that she doesn't know. She assumes that she might be eliminated, but she doesn't care anymore, saying that she's tired. All this time she tried to live up to expectations, held on to life with all her might, and was even ready to be used by someone for the sake of a task. However, the girl says that everything turned out to be pointless. Al replies that for some reason this makes him angry, perhaps because he talked to Silas. Vera remembers the boy, asking if he is a leader among the children. She repeats the guy's words about running away for life, surprising him by saying that she heard everything. The girl gives a positive answer, saying that although she is not from the capital, she, like Silas, wandered around the back streets. Vera remembers that no one appeared before her and that the shadows of the royal family helped her. She thought that she'd escaped from the cruel reality, but only a torturous, endless prison with no future awaited her. The girl tearfully says that she wants to escape from the prison called reality. Al reflects that he guessed that she was from the slums. He remembers the boy who resisted his hand, and thinks that the difference lies in who helped them. This is probably what makes him angry, because he remembered his former self as a whiny boy. Vera thinks that she can't do it anymore, and deep down inside, she's still little and hasn't stopped crying. She says goodbye to Al at the same time, wants to say something, even if she is not supposed to. Bowing completely before the hero, Vera begs him to help Silas and the others find a safe place. Al, greatly shocked by the girl's actions, thinks that this is too much and is it really worth it. He tells her that if she really wants to leave the shadows of the royal family, then maybe she can take on a leadership role. Vera is very surprised by such a proposal and looks at the guy with incomprehension. In the city, Victor clarifies with Al that he wants to use Vera for his own purposes. The guy gives a positive answer and says that this is also connected with the herald of the prophecy. The man gets angry and asks what is the point of collecting rumors from the streets, and that Al wants to use children from the slums for this. The hero replies that even his interlocutor says so, but even in the city one can quite often meet black mana. Of course, in matters of the prophet, they have the support of Victor and others. Thanks to this, there will be no problems. But enemies are hiding among the common people. So the guy offers to work where others won't go, and besides, only he could see black mana. The man, alarmed, wonders what Al is trying to achieve, that he has realized who Vera is, and that he is seriously planning to use children to gather information. He doesn't understand anything, and thinks that the hero doesn't want to part with Vera. On the other side of the table, Clay asks Albert if what he is about to do will be of any use to the prophet. He replies that it is unlikely, rather it will reduce the harm. Victor asks the hero to ask one question. The man asks if Al is going to make Vera his lover and if he is attracted by her beauty. This question surprises both the guy and Clea. Albert starts laughing loudly, surprising the people outside the door. Victor doesn't understand why the guy is laughing, and the trio comes to them from outside. Clea calms the company down by saying that it was just Victor asking a stupid question. Holding back his laughter, Al says that who would have thought that Victor had such inclinations, which makes him blush and get angry. The woman asks Victor to calm down and says that she thought he was boring, but he turned out to be even worse. The three of them, including Vera, cannot understand what is happening. The hero says that it was an absolutely stupid question and repeats it again, adding that it is not very nice to say such things in Vera's presence. Because of Al's words, the girl's partners stand up for her. The hero says that the girl is still a child, and he himself sees in her only a little girl. He turns to Victor with a threat and asks him if he is really looking at Vera with lust. The guy orders him to answer, looking at him with a crazy look. Clea asks Albert to stop, saying that the man is really guilty this time, also adding that Victor wanted to tease the hero, stupidly of course, but without malicious intent. Having calmed down, Al says that the man is lucky, because if this were in the Falconer lands, he would have been killed. He adds that in the harsh lands, children are a treasure, and women who are able to give birth are treated with respect. He advises to stay away from Falconer's domain. Clay, smiling, says that she completely agrees with the guy. The woman calls Vera and asks if she is ready to leave the shadow of the royal house and become Albert's ally. The girl confidently says that if there is even the slightest opportunity, she wants to leave the shadow of the royal house and try a different path. Clay accepts her answer, then gets up from her chair and says that from now on, Vera will leave the shadow of the royal house and will act as an ally of the hero apostle. She says that Yoel and Launo will remain as they are for now, and a replacement for Vera will be found later. The woman also orders Victor to arrange for Vera and Al to receive some money. Clea turns to the girl, saying that everything that concerns the seer and the apostles, she will provide them with information and, if necessary, act, and whether this suits the hero. Albert agrees, and he himself would like to establish an exchange of information. Vera also agrees and says that she will not regret collaborating with the shadow of the royal house. One word from the boss, and everything was decided. That's what was agreed upon. Thus began a new battle of faith. Later, when leaving, the girl turns to Albert and thanks him for doing this for her sake. He reassures her by telling her not to exaggerate, to which the girl thanks him anyway. The hero says that she wanted to leave the shadow of the royal house, and he just didn't have enough people for the guild. He adds that it was just a coincidence and asks not to pay attention to it. However, Al says that it can be considered that they were brought together by fate. He, a little embarrassed, asks to continue working together. Vera was glad about his request and agreed with him. However, Albert says that first they need to deal with the current problem. The girl remembers the attack in front of people in fear, and the guy asks if they will forgive them. In the village, the children look at Al, a worried Vera, and Silas with distrust and incomprehension. The boy apologizes, saying that he tried to convince the others but they still don't believe him, to which the hero replies that such a reaction is quite logical. The girl kneels and bows her head, apologizing to the children, and the boy bows a little before them. Thus, with a new path, a new ally, Eve's fight is just beginning. Albert turns to Silas, who already has new clothes, and asks if the older ones are getting used to the work, to which the boy replies that they are more or less. A month has passed since the guild began its work. They have not yet entered the people's district, since everything is still in the preparation stage. The boy reports that Joey and Eliza are more or less coping with work at Vargas's hotel, and Saji has also found work as an apprentice on the Street of Artisans. The owner of the hotel, Vargas, supported Al's plan. Although the contract was only for a month's trial period, he came to an agreement and they managed to rent one of the empty houses nearby. However, Silas says that with the younger ones, things are complicated. The older ones are Silas, Joey, Eliza, and Saji, each aged between 10 and 12. The younger ones are 5 and are still too young to work, each aged between 3 and 8. Al tells the boy that everything is fine and he doesn't have to worry about expenses. Moreover, the hero sees that the children have already become friends with Vera. The girl remained in the role of Albert's assistant. She insisted on this, and he did not argue. Now she spends almost all her time looking after the younger ones. Silas says that as a small compensation, he heard something interesting at the tavern where he works part-time. Vera turns to Al, saying that he could have warned her that he was coming. He replies that everything is fine because he just decided to hang out with the younger ones for a bit. Since she left the shadow of the royal family, the girls seem to relax and become softer. Harsh training, constant killing, even persecution from other squads, all this is in the past. Looking after children, perhaps the girl is learning to feel again what she once lost. Vera apologizes that, as an assistant, she has to be there for Al. The guy replies that she doesn't need to be with him all the time, and he will call her when she needs him, adding that he is very grateful to her for taking care of the younger ones. Embarrassed, Vera thinks that no one has ever thanked her so sincerely, and she feels somehow awkward. The girl asks about the purpose of the visit, and the hero replies that there are rumors about the return of the undead deacon at the destroyed church, and that this looks like a throw-in by those who do not want anyone to go there. Last time, only Mary was banished, but Deacon Franz escaped and is still at large, and, of course, the church says nothing about it. Al thinks that this is the work of some underground activists and doubts whether Deacon was a real quest in the game. The guy understands that it seems that the main characters are successfully getting closer to important characters, and there is no longer any point in relying on knowledge from the game, and he should focus on the signs of war. In the evening, Vera reports that there are 8 people inside the building, 3 on guard outside and 1 more on duty, calling them ordinary thugs. However, he adds that the mage does not seem to be one of them. Hell is glad that they immediately stumbled upon a clue. He says that whoever organized the deal is unreasonable, to which the girl replies that the church has been closely monitoring the area where the couple is located since that very destruction. The real target for Allah and Vera is the man in the distance. They need to take him and leave. The girl listens to him and asks what to do with the others. One of the thugs is pierced right in the chest by Vera's chain, which frightens the other. The chain lifts the man into the air, and the others look at him in fear. The girl throws the man and appears in the air in front of the others. After the death of her parents, Vera found peace and her place in this world for the first time. The younger and older children reminded her of her former self, and she would never allow them to repeat the same path. That's why she's not going to forgive the thugs. The girl's chains capture the rest of the men, so when she could protect her chains of submission became faster, sharper, and more evolved. The masked thug screams in fear, and Al asks who they are. Later, Albert and Vera stand in front of some boxes, and he thinks that he really did stumble upon such a horror. However, in the capital there are not only nobles, but also such terrible people that it's simply terrifying. Al thinks that it's not that he wants to bring order to the world, but he still wants to continue the cleansing. He turns to Vera, saying that he knows she doesn't like such fights, but that things like this will still happen in the future, and asks her to let him count on her help. To which the girl replies that it was he who gave her both peace and meaning in life, adding that she would serve him no matter what happened. Faith subordinate to the mad berserker, for his sake, for the sake of those who need to be protected, she no longer wavers. And Albert, the apostle, not only left her alive, but also created a guild. Now the two of them are walking along a road drenched in blood. There is no turning back. 3 days have passed since the shady deal incident, but no useful information has been received yet. Vera explains that in a matter of such magnitude, even a great nobleman would find it difficult to hush everything up, and that the name of the Drake's house is unknown to her. Most likely, they are just nobles. Information is regularly supplied to the guild, but it is mostly unnecessary talk that does not yield anything. The girl asks Al if there was any useful information, to which he says that there was nothing at all, but he will still support the children even if nothing comes of it. Vera looks at the guys smiling and agrees with the guy's words. Later at the table, the guy turns to his partner, saying that he will stay in the academy dormitory for now and asks her to look after the guild. The girl obeys and asks how long he will be there, to which the hero replies that it will be for about 2 weeks. Vera says that she will be a little lonely, and Al replies that if she gets bored, she can visit him and he will drop by himself. Confused by these words, the girl says that he is right, and if she can, she will try to come to the academy. At the academy, Albert asks his friend about the condition of the deity's 2 children, to which his friend asks him not to mention their names as if it were a normal greeting. The hero replies that he is always watching those around him and that they should not worry. He says that there is still a stranger there and continues to ask about the condition of the main characters. Yoel replies that they have been successfully establishing connections with the church and influential people in the country, and are also diligently mastering white mana. There are some problems with Prince Adam, however. The guy tries to change the subject, but Al claims that they agreed to exchange information through Clea. Besides, calling someone by their first name is a sign of intimacy. Adam reluctantly agreed to let Daryl call Ariel by her first name. Beloved, and also a childhood friend, they are connected by something more than just names. Besides, Cecily is his childhood friend. Adam is clearly not the one he wants to hang out with. 15 is a difficult and changeable age, and it is not clear what is going on in the prince's soul. Al thinks that the guys have a lot of difficulties ahead, and says that he understands how difficult it is to pretend to be a stranger, even if it is for the sake of the mission. Yoel says he doesn't know what to do, since Prince Adam considers them Daryl's faction, adding that only Cecily was able to talk normally with the prince, but lately even she began to be suspicious of those around her, including them. Suddenly, Yoel feels sick and says that his stomach has been hurting from stress lately. He is offered medicine, and Al realizes that working at court is very difficult. Yoel asks the hero about Vera, to which he replies that now she is doing a great job of taking care of the children, adding that he felt like she had become much more alive. Yoel calms down and reflects that the burden of the shadow of the royal family was too heavy for her. She tried her best to hide it, but in fact, she has a good heart and it's good that she didn't break earlier. He and his friend bow their heads to Alu and ask him to take care of Vera. Albert smiles at them and thinks that perhaps the girl was too focused back then and didn't notice that even among the shadows of the royal family there was someone who was worried about her. At the academy, the guy looks around at the students and is surprised that there are only bright personalities there. Among them are a girl who refers to herself in the masculine gender, a teacher who is called Wonyi, in a completely inappropriate maid uniform. And there is a lot of black mana in the academy. But the one that flickers is not so much hostility towards the chosen one, but envy of the special treatment of the students. Al doesn't feel like he's handling this power well and would like to talk to someone who has sacred magic. Lady Clea apparently knows something, but the guy's intuition tells him not to ask her. He understands that if he asks, everything will end and nothing will be returned. Suddenly, someone approaches him from behind. The stranger asks Al's permission to give him some of his time. The hero turns around, gives a positive answer, and asks about the identity of the unknown person. He is alarmed that he did not feel the presence of the person in front of him at all. The interlocutor apologizes and introduces himself as Conrad. The guy says that he found some information about Al's family. Albert himself asks to be called Al and clarifies that Conrad did not come to him of his own free will, to which he responds positively. He says that Falconer was interested in the hero, and that is why he approached him. Al notices the theatrical style of his interlocutor and asks if this is some kind of test of strength or an invitation to become a teacher. Conrad apologizes for not being able to answer and says that it is better for the hero to hear it directly. The hero thinks that this is suspicious, but in Conrad's behavior, he feels respect and sincerity, perhaps because there is no falsehood in it to show how serious everything is. Al accepts the offer and specifies that he needs to go immediately, which pleases his interlocutor and receives gratitude. In the student dormitory, the hero admires how Conrad controls both his mana and his movements, and understands that he clearly won't be able to reach such a level of camouflage. He will try to avoid close combat with him. Yet, although Al had the example of the shadows of the royal family, he still underestimated the capital and its nobility. He admires the interior and thinks that dealing with the capital's nobles seemed tedious, but since Conrad was interested in them, he became interested too. Entering the room, the hero prepares for the worst. A little boy meets him and thanks him, but also apologizes for the boy indulging his whim. Al is surprised and thinks that the academy accepts people from 13 to 16 years old, and the boy looks something like Silas. Conrad calls the hero away, and he realizes it's time to introduce himself. The child calls himself Celian, not mentioning his last name as is tradition, and apologizes for gathering information about him. Al accepts the apology, but says he doesn't care about it anymore and asks them not to worry. Lately, he has noticed that he is easily recognizable to Southerners. Conrad says that the guy has already guessed, but the hero interrupts him and says that if he needs to talk, he will come to the bed. The boy's mana flow was disrupted, even those welcoming words were difficult for him to say. Celian apologizes for lying in front of Al, but the boy says there is nothing to apologize for. However, the boy is worried that the hero is from the famous Falconer family and whether he feels disgust towards him. Al says that his family is certainly called barbarians, but they do not take offense at those who show respect. Conrad and Celian are surprised by his words. The boy says that in Falconer, the strong are right, and weaklings like him are simply eliminated there. The hero says that he doesn't care about rumors anyway, and asks why Celian wanted to see him. The boy desperately replies that he would like to learn body enhancement, the Falconer's secret technique, and asks Al to teach him. He shouts that he understands that it is absolutely unacceptable to reveal the secrets of the clan to others, but he swears by the goddess and his ancestors that he will not tell anyone about this. Conrad also shouts and asks to listen to his master's request, adding that they will provide whatever Al wants as a token of gratitude. The hero says that apparently they have a misunderstanding about the Falconers. Falconer's body enhancement is actually just a normal basic magic, but there is one difference. Falconers do not activate mana because it saves strength and gives a stronger effect. This technique, similar to the techniques of insects from the Great Forest, was invented by their ancestors for protection. But because of its unusualness, this technique can seem frightening to those who see it for the first time. Among the peaceful inhabitants of the Falconer territory, there are those who also use activation from household magic. Moreover, Allah's father is an extremely pragmatic person. He developed it in his own way, and it is his method, as the hero thinks, that is the real secret technique of his family. Conrad asks that all he needs to do is not activate the mana, to which Al replies that he will understand the essence in half a day. However, he adds that he will be able to switch to the opposite approach for a person who always fought by activating mana. Conrad understands that one blow is okay, but it will be difficult to maintain the effect for a long time. The guy is convinced that Celian can simply manifest the effect, to which Al replies that it will work if only he manifests it, but the essence of Falconer enhancement is no different from the usual one. That is, you shouldn't expect any special effects like removing poison, curses, or suppressing diseases. Celian, hearing this, apologizes for calling the hero on such a matter and says that he tried both healing magic and divine rituals. However, nothing helped him and Al asks to postpone talking about the Falconer's secrets for now. He tells the boy that he sees something that is eating him up from the inside and wants to talk about it. Later on the street, Yoel scolds Allah that even after his words, he can't just contact Victor. The hero replies that this is serious, because he found a person who was definitely influenced by black mana. Yuel is surprised by this, and says that he should have started with this, and asks if the guy is sure about this. Celian Golton is the son of a count, studying at the academy. The hero tested the influence of black mana on the boy a little. He felt a strong hostility towards the child. The boy had started to get sick 3 years ago, and divine magic had not helped, and the black mana had not been recognized. Al says that the Golton family is old nobility, closely connected to the royal dynasty and the next shadows of the crown. Yuel says that he will contact Victor immediately and asks Rayana to stay with Daryl and the others, just in case. He also asks Al to stay in the dorm and wait until he is called. The guys left, and the hero thinks that the situation is becoming more and more dangerous. He thinks that it is connected with some event. Al himself doesn't understand anything and thinks that it would be better to sit quietly in the dorm. However, suddenly someone calls him away. An unknown man says that old Vince wants to talk to him and asks to go with him. The hero notices that since he entered the academy, he has been called somewhere. Vince apologizes for the sudden call to him. Al calms him down and asks if it's urgent and gets a positive answer. However, Grandpa still hesitates to talk about it. He says that his people are not free in their actions either, although the hero still knows who they are. The guy replies that he threw Vince's people off the trail a couple of times. Al clarifies that the grandfather has already realized that the guy is in contact with the shadow of the crown, and the request is probably related to this. He says that he doesn't like the noble manner of speaking in hints and asks to tell everything briefly and to the point. Grandfather listens to him and says that in general, they have 2 things to do. Firstly, the fact that Aida left, seemingly driven by a thirst for revenge against Al, although now she calls herself Nina. Nina met with some girl saying that it was time for her to tell them what they were really trying to achieve, adding that those she thought were the real supporters of the war and were not going to back down. The girl with the glass says that her interlocutor is impatient, but they really do support the war, they just have other things to do. Nina, who is already asking what they want from her anyway, the girl laughed at the girl's directness and said that she had to guard one nobleman, and there was a chance that their trap had already been noticed, and they wanted to stop it before surveillance happened. Adding that if something happens, eliminate the target along with the problem and smashes his glass in his hands. Nina thinks that if she can kill people, she will gladly allow them to use her because the unknowns have real power, unlike Vince. The girl watches as the unknown person licks the spilled liquid in her hand and calls her a real demon. She understands that she is weak, but she still will not give up until she kills Al at any cost. Al clarifies with Vince that Ada is the one he was covering for, and that now she has escaped and is plotting revenge. Grandfather gives a positive answer and says that now she is deprived of her name and now lives as Nana, mentioning that in their family, taking away someone's name given at birth is a severe punishment. He adds that it would be easier to get rid of her as soon as they find her, but things are not so simple, so the second part of his case begins. Vince says that he initially mistakenly believed that Al was on some secret mission. However, it turned out that this is not the case, and his world is full of oddities. He asks that the hero didn't even know that they were demons. Al is very surprised by what was said and begins to realize that everyone present in the room is also a demon. Vince explains that they are demons who have chosen to merge with human society and are called fusionists for convenience. After that incident, their family changed their views, and those who were unhappy with the changes fled with Nina. And they were given shelter by the so-called war faction, hiding in the kingdom under a secret mission from the central country of demons. At least, that's what Vince thought, but things turned out differently. Previously, the kingdom tacitly acknowledged the existence of demons in its lands, but recently anti-monster movements have grown stronger among the nobility, and it is now difficult for demons to even contact their patrons. So Vince decided to contact the war faction to talk, and then it turned out that some others, calling themselves the war faction, had been talking to Nina for a long time. He doesn't know if they can be called real, but they were not at all the ones he negotiated with, and it is not clear what goals they are pursuing. Al listens to him and thinks that in the game too, the demons were never united. There were some splits and factions. According to the prophecy, if you deal with demons, then 100 years of suffering will come. So the rise of anti-monster sentiments is clearly connected to that very prophecy and the child of God. Al clarifies that Vince wants him to pass it all on in the shadow of the crown. Grandfather gives a positive answer, because without the consent of the patrons, they will not be able to act secretly. He says that he will also pursue the fugitives, but if the kingdom does not receive information, they may be destroyed simply for being demons. Al listens to him and says that he will convey this to the shadow of the royal family, because he will have to meet them soon anyway. Vince thanks him and says that they have established communication channels with representatives of the fighting faction and will inform the guy about everything if necessary. He says that this is the end of their conversation and notes that Al was not at all surprised to learn that they were demons, to which the hero replies that he was surprised by this. The guy says that they just don't have horns or claws, because that's how he imagined demons. Grandpa replies that's exactly what the demons the church describes look like. Vince says that they are actually almost indistinguishable from humans because their appearance is easy to hide. Some of them hide their scales under their clothes and the roca under their hair. He says that those who look like the guy imagines are true demons, and the people call them Mazin Tai. Nine was also once considered one because of her mana, but even in the homeland of demons, there aren't many real Majins. Vince says it's like among humans, the level of ancient or great nobility. Al is a little surprised by his stories. If someone like the hero's father is able to change the course of an entire battle single-handedly, then that is dangerous. He tells his grandfather that he has figured out everything regarding Nina, formerly known as Aida, and those posing as the faction. Adding that no matter what path Vince chooses next, he will not dare to say that it is wrong and hopes that they will not meet as enemies. But even if that happens, he will come to terms with it. Grandfather agrees with him and says that as far as Nine and the others are concerned, he will not allow them to go against the interests of Al and the kingdom, because it is his duty. Al realizes that Vince has finally made up his mind and asks him to tell him something. He says that he responds to kindness with kindness, respect with respect, and hostility with hostility, because that is the way of the Falconers with the motto, "If you are attacked, fight back." Grandpa replies that he understood everything and that he fully realized what the guy really is, because earlier he said that if Vince doesn't want to be killed, he needs to be raised correctly. Both Al and Vince already realized that there were those among them who did not agree with their decision. The era of peace has come to an end, and the survival of the race is at stake. Some put personal feelings above the will of the elders, and Vince will no longer stand on ceremony with them. Someone approaches Sign, asking that the truth is about to be revealed. She says that it hasn't come to that yet, but adds that whoever comes into contact with the seed she planted may appear to the apostles. And if we talk about a family that could compete with the family of Earl Golton, then first of all the Courtney family comes to mind. In front of her sits the head of the Earl's family, Eden Courtney. He says that suspicions against them are quite expected, but still not at the right time, because there is very little time left. Signy sees a chessboard and reaches out to it, thinking that the man has an old-fashioned, noble style of playing. Eden tells the guards that he has his own bodyguards, and that is enough. Adding that if all sorts of suspicious individuals were to walk around the estate, they would simply have no excuses left. The girl says that they are not going to set up a guard post permanently, and that today it is just a precautionary measure. She raises the pawn, saying that they understand their roles perfectly well. Eden speculates that this is another threat to shut them up, since 5 years have passed since the deals began, and Sine is still in the form of a child, calling him neither a demon nor a man, but a vile, forbidden monster. Signy, moving the pieces, thinks that Lord Courtney's benefit is high, but if the moment comes, then something will have to be sacrificed. To release the forces transferred to them at this stage, the Supreme Commander must understand this. With a wild look, she thinks that this is a great chance to repel the attack, because the Supreme One will not object. She notices something and tells Eden that the White King is nowhere to be seen. He says that he will assign a subordinate to look for it later. In the dorm, late at night, the next day after Al noticed the black mana engulfing Celian, the guy turns to someone and says that he didn't expect him to show up so soon. The unknown person tells the hero to go to that very room. Al thinks he knew the man was a man of few words, but is nevertheless once again amazed by the skills of the Royal House's shadow. especially Ryun, who was stronger than Vera and Yoel, because his disguise was now perfect, and now the hero understands why Vera rated him so highly. He hopes that things don't come to blows. When he goes outside, Al thinks that after Ryun it is especially hard. At this time, on the roof, Vince's subordinate thinks that he won't succeed after all, adding that the future of his family was killed, and that says it all, and why Vince can't understand this. He admits that Al has no vulnerabilities, but wonders how long he can cover them up. There are many subordinates who are also sitting on the roof, and even if the man dies, there will be another one, and even if the hero is a first-class master, he definitely has pride. He waits for the moment to attack, but suddenly all his partners are killed. The man looks at the corpse and turns to Al and can't believe it. The guy looks menacingly at Vince's subordinate, who's very scared of him. Al thinks that a man needs to be at least a little more careful. Although he feels that Vince used him too, he doesn't care about it. Ryun was watching this, and he was alarmed to realize that Al was ruthless and strong. He saw that the guy was moving so fast that only distances could be discerned, and this was beyond the ordinary. Ryun thinks that the hero is not only strong in close combat, and he doesn't want to fight him even more. Al also realizes that his friend has noticed him, but he too has noticed his style of disguise, and now they are even. The hero comes to Clea and Victor, and the girl says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. She notes that the guy brings too much dangerous information every time. Al replies that he is an apostle after all, so this is the will of the goddess. Clea realizes that he is lying, and he is not at all grateful for the goddess's guidance. Victor asks her permission to continue the conversation and receives a positive answer. The man tells Al that Celian has been examined by renowned healers and sacred mages many times, and none of them mentioned anything about the black mana snake. He clarifies that the hero still claims to have seen this creature. The guy says that he is absolutely sure and, moreover, the black mana tried to attack even him, simply because he touched it. Victor asks if this could be someone's attack, to which the hero replies that it most likely is, and says that this is another inter-clan showdown covered by a prophecy. With these words, he surprises Ron and Yoel. Clea laughs and asks how Al saw this black mana and thought he could handle it. The guy replies that Celian probably won't like it, but it doesn't seem like a threat. After all, if you killed a caster, the problem will be solved, and that's exactly the impression he got. The girl says that he still lies badly. She says that Al wanted to stop the black mana and stop the sage, asking that he felt a strong desire to stop them since he is one of the apostles. The hero thinks that if she already knows everything, then why is she asking and wants them to figure it out themselves, since they have power? He feels like he's already allergic to black mana and shudders when he's around Clea. She's like the source of it, like a hidden boss after the finale, and such a character would definitely be memorable in the main plot. Victor asks Al to answer Clea. The hero obeys and says that he really felt that he had to stop this, and since they all understand, then why are they asking, which again surprises the guys at the door. The girl, holding back her laughter, tells the guy to stop playing dangerous games, thinking that he can deceive her, adding that otherwise he would run into her righteous anger. No one in the room understood her, but Al was very surprised by her words. Al remembers how, after killing the monster, the boy asked him the meaning of the word "eg," which meant simple or easy. His friend said that he sometimes uses strange words. The hero understood that in this world, words from a past life are often not understood, and how surprised he was that no one understood him. At the moment, he is surprised that Clea knows this expression, because there they say such expressions as stepping on a dragon's tail or pulling the whiskers of an ancient monster, but they do not talk about righteous anger. The girl turns to Victor, saying that it is most likely Courtney, Yi. He says that it seems that the knights from the church have been watching him for a long time. Courtney was allegedly involved in shady dealings, but everything is kept at the level of suspicion. There is no evidence. Witnesses from the scene were dead. Al understands that now no one dares to mention righteous anger. However, he also understands that this cannot be talked about, and he feels this very clearly. Clea says to throw Courtney to the knights from the guard, then their enemy will come out himself, adding that they are hiding well, but they have little patience. Victor listens to her and will do it immediately. She turns to Al, asking if he could do the destruction of those who come out, adding that those who wield black mana are the enemies of the child of prophecy, and it is his turn. Al realizes that she knew who the enemy was from the very beginning. In the village, he tells Vera that he needs to participate in the operation because, as an apostle, he must help in the cleanup, and this is a personal request from Clay herself. The younger ones are already running errands in the shopping district, 2 per group. Al says that the demons seem to be planning revenge, so he asks the girl to be on guard, but adds that Clea somehow did not take the threat from the demons very seriously. Vera says she doesn't quite understand what he's talking about. After the hero's story, the girl menacingly says that he needs to be informed about such things immediately. He apologizes to her in fear. She clarifies that those suspicious people last night were also enemies, and their bodies disappeared without her even noticing when. Al says that since the tracks were cleaned up, that means yes, adding that it looks like those who are unhappy with Vince have already started to act, then they need to change their chickens and will act proactively. He says that it is better for the younger ones not to come out for now, and of the older ones, Silas and Saji might break through. Vera says that if the enemy is of the same level as yesterday, they will cope, although she is still worried. Al replies that there is too much unknown and suggests thinning out the enemy ranks right away, especially since Clea's request is not urgent yet, and it would be necessary to finish off Nina while there is still time. The girl clarifies that Naina is the one the guy didn't finish off, and that she is dangerous. The hero replies that he simply underestimated her, and that only the strongest will survive on the battlefield, adding that in any case help wouldn't hurt, and suggests calling Colin. He mutters that Colin can handle the mages from the capital, and could also keep an eye on Silas and the others, and says that it's not a bad idea. Vera interrupts him, asking if he has already made a decision. Al apologizes and says that he thought it would be worth contacting someone from his family for the future, and he doesn't want to put everything on her. The girl thanks the guy for his work, but she is upset that she made him worry so much and apologizes for her helplessness. Al, looking at this, thinks that he doesn't like city manners. Vince's minions ask if he's really going to just turn a blind eye to this. One of them says that 8 people have already been killed and this has gone too far. Vince asks what they want from him and says that he should go to Mr. Al and ask him for forgiveness on their behalf. The servant shouts that they want to get even and believe that they must finish him off themselves for the honor of their family. He recalls telling Vince that there were more important things than getting revenge on Al, and if he was so keen to act, ignoring the elder's opinion. Grandfather replies that then they can't count on him and demands that the clan not be involved in this, which shocks the men. He says that he will not waste another second on them and orders that the men be seized and taken away, which they do not complain about and ask to be heard. Vince asks the others to leave and speculates that Al will get to Nina first. He so wanted to see her lead their clan like Ada. All those who have fallen before this moment, he will not ask for forgiveness for not being able to lead them the right way and asks them to wait until he goes to the world of the dead. And when he gets there, they can pour out all their anger on him. Signy asks Nina what all this means, to which she replies that they are being caught, and those who escape with her disappear one after another, and some they found already dead. Signy asks if this is a massacre of the supporters of reconciliation, and the girl says no, and judging by the injuries on the bodies, she could not be mistaken that it was Al. The girl comes up to her and says that maybe they should deal with him first, which surprises her subordinate. Nina says that he is strong only in magic, adding that he is generally kind of strange. Signy turns around laughing and, with a creepy, dark face, says that it's just like her. She says that she doesn't have to kill herself and calls 2 subordinates, calling them dolls, and saying that even the heads of aristocratic houses can barely cope with them. The girl asks what Nina thinks about this and says that they can't let Courtney go unattended and allows her to use the summons or kill Al herself. Nina replies that she cannot yet fully control the dolls to fight the hero. Kneeling, she asks Signy to kill him no matter how. The girl agrees and says that the girl has already done enough, even more than enough, and orders Nina to take the dolls and watch Courtney, adding that if someone from the church interferes, eliminate Courtney without any hesitation and retreat and can break 2-3 dolls and leave. The girl obeys her. Suddenly, another girl appears next to her, addressing her as Ida and asking if she really wanted it that way. Nina addresses the stranger as Carla, responding that she simply cannot, and so sent someone who can against Al. Carla calls her sister a stubborn crybaby, just like she was as a child, and if she is so scared, she asks her to forget about her revenge. Nina says she's not crying and asks her not to talk nonsense, but her sister still mocks her. Carla says that Signia is a monster and cannot be used at her own discretion, and since the girl has taken her side, she must be prepared for the consequences. Nina replies that she understands this herself, but if she can avenge everyone, she doesn't care about anything else. She tells Carla that if she wants to leave, now is the best time. The older sister strokes her head, which surprises the girl. Carla says she will stay because she is worried about her little sister and will stay there a little longer. Nina reminds her that she already told her not to do this. Later, Vera asks if it can be considered that his Vince and his clan are finished, adding that at least no one openly hated Al anymore. In front of them lay corpses and a destroyed room. The hero thinks that it is not nice of Vince and again decides not to kill himself, but he will still have to pay for it. Vera, looking at her hand, thinks that since she was in the royal shadow, the radius of sensitivity has noticeably increased. She is glad that she will be able to help Al even more. The guy notes that the reaction to hostility works perfectly and that there are suspects not only among strangers, but also in the commoners' quarter. He also reflects that Vera quickly got her bearings and adapted to his crazy proposal. And if this continues, they will soon get to Nina, but suddenly he feels a flow of black mana. The partner understands this, and Al replies that it looks like the black mana user is back in action and not alone. Judging by the direction they're heading, they seem to be heading towards the guild, and now they seem to be aiming at him. Vera says that we must return immediately, but although the users are moving in the middle of the day, she assumes that the enemy is too confident in himself. Al realizes that the fake war supporters, who have Nina as a pawn and are the black mana users, and Clea knew about this and that's why she reacted so calmly. It seems to him that everything is connected and he begins to laugh desperately. He tells Vera that, as planned, he will attack the enemies, and if he doesn't finish them off, he asks her to cover him and hold them back, and the girl obeys him. Signa says he wanted to take someone hostage, but it looks like his rivals had anticipated this. She increased the number of dolls because Nina was scared. The girl removes several dolls, leaving one, and leaves the room with him. Signy, a person who calls herself a supporter of war, and even that is under doubt, has been hiding in the society of people in the capital for more than 10 years and knows both their good and bad sides. But it's not just her own abilities. She and her beloved leader created artificial people, and they are made from living bodies, forbidden magic and sulfur mana. These are high-class combat dolls that have attack power on par with the heads of the aristocracy and are even stronger physically. With them under her belt, she completely stopped taking people seriously. She looks at the residents and realizes that they have been noticed and that this may be an ambush. She placed many dolls within a 300-meter radius and waited for the enemies to do something suspicious, and they would become fertilizer for the dolls. Her knowledge of humans is limited to the capital and the eastern regions. She confidently decided that the rest are the same and did not bother herself any further. That's why she doesn't know about the crazy clan from the south. Suddenly, something very quickly cuts off her right arm. Before the attack, Al watched Signy and wondered if the man next to her was either undead or a golem, but saw that he was moving with black mana. He thinks that, although she is a weaker version, she has the same repulsive feeling as Clea, and he wonders if Clea is one of them too. Al wants to stop thinking about it and concentrates that at a distance of about 500 meters, he will most likely not be detected. He summons a magic ball and thinks that this Siony is strong, but cannot hide her presence. He focuses the ball on his finger, and this is one of his trump cards called Sniper Shot. To focus on the shot, Al freezes. The technique is powerful, but leaves him vulnerable. A feat that only the father, Slyan, had achieved in this generation. A test to inherit the title of head of the family. Al, too, with this COI, single-handedly defeated one of the strongest inhabitants of the depths of the Great Forest. He cuts off Signy's hand, greatly shocking her. The villagers are frightened by the severed arm and the fact that it is inflated with bubbles in the cut area. At this time, the doll quickly takes the girl in her arms. The doll runs away, and Al follows them, jumping between the roofs, and thinks that the sight is still not perfectly adjusted, and reloading takes time, and in the end, you still have to get closer. Adding that, is it true that the enemy is a child of prophecy, and it is not even a demon? It does not look like a living being at all. Suddenly, other servants of Signy come out from behind the doll. She thinks with pain that this was, and this is, the same attack that Nina was talking about, and this is not at all what they agreed on, adding that this body is her masterpiece creation. However, Vera's chains are directed at the dolls and kill each one by one. The girl sees that these are not people, but Sine notices Vera on the roof. One of the dolls pulls the chains, which attracts the girl to itself and surprises her. She releases her weapon and lands on the ground a short distance in front of the enemies. Sine realizes that it is not Al and assumes that it is bait, while Vera thinks that her rival has disgusting mana. Suddenly, a doll attacks the girl from above, but she quickly dodges, but the dolls still try to attack her. Vera quickly dodges multiple attacks and thinks that mana does not fluctuate at all, and it is impossible to predict the movements of enemies.